Faites l'appel, s'il vous plaît, Madame le greffier.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Hélier. Madame le connétable de Saint-Laurent.
Présente.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Brelade.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de la Trinité.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Pierre.
Présent.
Madame le connétable de Saint-Martin. Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Jean.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Clément. Monsieur le connétable de Grouville.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Ouen. Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Marie. Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Sauveur.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Southern. Madame le député Labbé.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Tadier. Monsieur le député Luce. Madame le député Dublé. Monsieur le député Morel.
Présent.
Madame le député Lehegara. Monsieur le député Ayer. Monsieur le député Ward.
Présent.
Madame le député Alves.
Présent.
Madame le député Gardner.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Gauss.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Farnham. Madame le député Moore.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Mezek.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Ozef. Monsieur le député Balash.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Coles.
Présent.
Madame le député Poré. Monsieur le député Ward.
Présent.
Madame le député Miles.
Présente.
Madame le député Scott.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Renouf.
Présent.
Madame le député Curtis. Madame le député Faltham.
Présente.
Madame le député Binet. Madame le député Jeune. Madame le député Miller.
Présente.
Madame le député Howell.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Binet. Monsieur le député Ferry.
Présent.
Madame le député Kovac.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Curtis. Madame le député Ward.
Présente.
Madame le député Wilson.
Présente.
Madame le député Stevenson.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Andrews.
Madame le greffier.
Prions Dieu. Notre aide soit au nom de Dieu qui a fait les cieux et la terre. Amen. Seigneur Dieu, Père éternel et tout-puissant, qui a établi les gouvernements et les puissances de la terre pour le règlement et pour la conduite du peuple, et qui nous a commandé d'avoir toujours pour but la gloire de ton saint nom. Nous te prions qu'il te plaise de donner à cette assemblée le don de conseil et de prudence, d'unir les cœurs et les affections de tous ceux qui la composent, et de les conduire tellement toi-même par ton Saint-Esprit que toute la délibération étant accompagnée de ta bénédiction réussisse au bien et au soulagement du peuple, qui te plus de commettra le soin. Quand nous t'en prions au nom et par le mérite de ton Fils bien-aimé Jésus-Christ, notre Seigneur, qui nous a enseigné de t'invoquer en disant « Notre Père, qui est aux cieux, ton nom soit sanctifié, ton règne vienne, ta volonté soit faite en la terre comme au ciel. Donne-nous aujourd'hui notre pain quotidien, et nous pardonne nos offenses, comme nous pardonnons à ceux qui nous ont offensés. Et ne nous induis point en tentation, mais délivre-nous du mal, car à toi la règne, la puissance et la gloire, au siècle des siècles. Amen. Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Hélier. Madame le connétable de Saint-Martin.
Sir, I wonder if the Connétable de Saint-Martin could be excused as she has to attend a funeral this morning. Will return as soon as she can.
Members content the connétable is marked excusez? Excusez.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Clément.
So the Connétable is at a hospital appointment this morning, but he will be joining later at 11 o'clock on Teams. So
Would
if
you
you
marked excusez in the meantime?
please, if we could.
Members content to mark the
Thank
connétable excusez? Excusez.
Thank you.
Monsieur le connétable de Sainte-Marie.
Sir, the Connétable of St Mary is on state's business with the British and Irish Parliamentary Association and wondered if he could be excused on state's business.
Yes, away on state's business.
Monsieur le député Southern.
Présent.
Madame le député Dublé.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Farnham,
Présent.
Monsieur le député Joseph,
Deputy Joseph is malade.
je jurerai que Monsieur le député Joseph est tellement indisposé qu'il ne peut pas assister aux états sans exposer sa santé. Madame le député Jeune,
Sir, Deputy Jeune is also with the Deputy of Constable of St Mary's on the British and Irish Parliamentary Association. I wondered if she could be marked as excused on State's business.
Yes, away on state's business. Les États sont constitués. On behalf of members, I'd like to welcome His Excellency to the Chamber this morning. Moving to the consolidated order paper, there are a number of subordinate enactments under B, number of documents presented or laid under C. The following propositions have been lodged. P82, Offshore Wind Amendment, lodged on the 2nd of April by Deputy War. P13, Pay Gap Reporting Amendment, lodged on the 9th of April by Deputy Jeune. P17, States of Jersey Development Company Limited, reappointment of a non-executive director, lodged on the 21st of March by the Minister for Treasury and Resources. P18, Assisted Dying, lodged on the 22nd of March by the Council of Ministers. P19, Minimum Wage, increased to match living wage, lodged on the 5th of April by Deputy Andrews. P20, In Vitro Fertilisation IVF funding, lodged on the 9th of April by Deputy Stevenson. And P21, Common Strategic Policy, lodged on the 9th of April by the Council of Ministers. Under E, in accordance with Standing Order 34.1, the proposer of the following proposition, lodged au greffe, has informed the greffier of the states that they are to be withdrawn. Protection of trees, P98, lodged on the 27th of November by Deputy Scott. Under F, there are nominations by the Chair of the Public Accounts Committee for the appointment of unelected members to the committee. It's a requirement under Standing Order 124 that at least 14 days before the meeting during which the unelected members are to be appointed, notice must be given to the greffier of the intended nominees, and nominations must be distributed to members. Those requirements have been met. In accordance with Standing Order 1244, I invite the Chair, Deputy Gardner, of the Public Accounts Committee to make her nominations. Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. I would like to nominate Glenn Keogh and Vijay Kahara to the non-elected members of this Public Account Committee, please.
Thank you very much. Are the nominations seconded?
Yes, sir.
Under Standing Order 1242, nominations from other members may be considered, but notice of such nominations must be given to the greffier at least 2 clear days before the relevant meeting. No other nominations were received, and I therefore declare that Glenn Kehoe and Vijay Kakaria have been duly appointed as members of the Public Accounts Committee. There are no matters under G or H. There are a number of written questions in respect of which answers have been tabled. And we now come to oral questions on notice. And the first question, Deputy Renouf will put to the Minister for Health and Social Services. Deputy Renouf.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister provide an update on the status of his response to the Royal College of Physicians Jersey Rheumatology report?
Minister.
Sir, since the release of the Jersey Rheumatology report, a number of its recommendations are currently being undertaken by HCS. These include certain patient reassessments which have resulted in various changes to patient diagnoses and/or medications. Work is now continuing at a pace to review the wider group of patients, and every effort is being made to communicate with them as frequently as possible throughout the process. Another important area being progressed is the development of much more robust clinical governance processes, and that's not just within the rheumatology department, but that's throughout the whole of HCS, and the imposition of stronger governance frameworks, such as monthly care group governance meetings. We're also in the process of appointing a new specialist rheumatologist to lead Jersey's rheumatology service. So, as expected, we've received a number of potential compensation claims which are currently being managed through a standard claims process, but we're continuing to explore alternative collective compensation schemes which may help to make the situation a little bit more manageable. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Supplementary?
Yes, thank the Minister for the response. Recommendation A of the plan, the very first recommendation, was that an action plan to implement all the recommendations should be created within 6 months and given to a non-executive board member to ensure the recommendations are completed. Will the Minister commit to producing this action plan and to follow the timetable in the report?
Minister.
The plan is currently under construction, sir, and yes, I can certainly commit to doing that.
Deputy Dublé.
Thank you, sir. Given many of the recommendations centred around a lack of strong clinical governance and many features of the health department may have contributed to this situation, is the Minister aware of any other potential clinical areas within our health department that where similar problems may have arisen?
Minister.
Yes, so there's some work being undertaken now to look through the whole of HCS and try and find well, we're putting together a list of a priority list in terms of areas that we want to consider after rheumatology, sir.
Can the Minister give an indication of either what type of areas he's looking at or the number of areas where he has concerns?
So I'd be a little bit happier to do that when we've got a little bit more firm information.
Thank you. Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. Does the Minister agree that the key issue identified in the report was a culture of reluctance to follow standard clinical guidelines and that making sure that the health service is built around clinical guidelines as a key part of ensuring public safety?
Minister.
Yes, sir, I think that's a reasonable assessment. There is a lot of work going on to implement a complete culture change, sir, which is quite complicated, but it's certainly work in progress.
Supplementary?
And who is the leading person? Is it the Minister and the responsible officer to implement this culture change within the HCS?
So I think it's fair to say that that's being done by the whole of the senior team in equal measure. You can't change culture unless everybody's on board. So yeah, that's being led by all of the principal people involved.
So, apology, but I think I asked about who is in charge of this change.
I think that was answered.
Well, if from a political perspective, that's certainly me, and I make no apology for that. And from an operational point of view, that's the CEO of HCS.
Deputy Coles.
Thank you, sir. Can the Minister outline how conflicts of interest are being managed within this review?
Minister.
To be honest with you, sir, off the top of my head, I can't bring to mind any particular conflicts of interest, but it's something I can certainly look at going forward.
Supplementary?
I find it hard that a health system that's so close and an island so small, there are no conflict of interest that are coming up. Does the Minister admit that he would need to review this to make sure that all declarations are clear and transparent?
Minister.
As I said with my first answer, sir, I'm very happy to look at that.
Deputy Brenner, final supplementary?
Yes, sir, thank you. The Common Strategic Policy does not include reference to implementing the rheumatology report. At the briefing on Friday that the Chief Minister gave, he justified the slimmed down CSP on the grounds that they were concentrating on actions that could be completed within 2 years. And given that the rheumatology report actions could fall within that, I would have thought it could have been included. Can he say why he doesn't feel that it justifies inclusion in the CSP?
Minister.
So there was a good deal of debate as to what should and shouldn't be included in the Common Strategic Policy. I think we all came to the conclusion that you just have to make a decision and that's it. Otherwise, you'd include everything and it wouldn't be focused particularly. I took the view quite simply that this is all work that's urgent, that has to be done, and putting it in the Common Strategic Policy wouldn't have actually brought it forward to any extent. The whole of the health service is receiving a lot of attention, and that attention won't change whether or not it's in the Common Strategic Policies.
Thank you. Question 2, Deputy Tadier will put to the Minister for Health and Social Services. Deputy Tadier.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister explain why the public are experiencing difficulties at the hospital pharmacy and what actions, if any, are being taken to address the problems?
Minister.
Sir, I'm reliably informed that the number of prescriptions being dispensed at the hospital pharmacy has been increasing gradually in recent times, and this, combined with the shortage of staff, has resulted in queues extending to thoroughly unacceptable levels. Fortunately, through a commitment to deploy more staff, several existing staff who'd announced their intention to leave have actually decided to stay on. This is going to cost a little bit more money, but I'm intending to address this and some more considerable funding matters over the course of the next few months. In addition, along with my small team, I've had several meetings with the Minister for Social Security and her officers, all of whom have been extremely helpful in coming up with ideas to tackle some of the more difficult problems involved in facilitating the collection of at least some prescriptions from external pharmacies. I hope that helps to cast a little bit more light on the situation, sir.
Thank you. Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. Is the Minister certain that the only reasons for the long queues and delays are staffing issues and the number of prescriptions involved? Is it not also to do with the system that is being used? And what steps has he or will he take to make sure that any system is expedited and efficient?
Minister.
So I had hoped to have covered that in the third paragraph of my last response. I'm working closely with the Minister for Social Security, and so are the two teams on our sides to get through what is a little bit more of a complicated matter than appears on the surface, given that the funding for pharmaceuticals comes from two different funds, and there are some prescribing difficulties in that the hospital pharmacy does hold some medications that can't be distributed from other pharmacies, sir.
Thank you, Minister. Conataba St Brelard.
Thank you, sir. Well, the Minister has outlined the funding issues, but would he confirm whether the issues over the Health Insurance Fund and who holds the purse strings for that? Thank you, sir.
Minister.
The Health Insurance Fund rests with Social Security, hence the discussions that I'm having with the Social Security Minister, sir.
Supplementary.
Yes, so would he agree that the queues, particularly for elderly people who don't know when they're going to be able to pick up their particular prescriptions, is entirely unacceptable, and would he be taking some short-term actions to alleviate the queues? Thank you, sir.
Minister.
So I think I described in my first response that the queues were thoroughly unacceptable, and we've had several emergency meetings to do what we can. The first thing we can do is put more staff, and at the end of last week we carried out some checks and the queues had tailed off a little bit, and we're working as quickly as we can to introduce some short-term measures just to take a bit of pressure off. But the longer to get it done properly will take a little bit longer.
Deputy Stevenson.
Thank you, sir. Is the Minister aware of concerns around culture, morale and even allegations of bullying in the pharmacy workforce? And if so, what is being done to address those concerns?
Minister.
I am aware of some issues. They're employment matters and I don't think they're for me to comment upon. But every issue at pharmacy is currently being dealt with. I'm comfortable to say that, sir.
Thank you, Minister. Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. Given that the Minister's first answer to the original question, the solution seemed to be to have more staff stay, does that not suggest that there should be a concern around recruitment and retention to the pharmacy? And does the Minister have any views about if these concerns around morale and bullying could be impacting that?
Minister.
So, to be honest, I think I answered that question with my last response.
Deputy Iyer.
Thank you, sir. The hospital pharmacy used to open at weekends. I know now it's only from Monday to Friday, 9 till 5. Would there be a possibility of opening on a Saturday for outpatients? Because it was open until September 2023. Thank you.
Minister.
It's something that's under consideration, but when you're a little bit short-staffed, that's sometimes difficult and it's more expensive. But it is under consideration, sir.
Supplementary? Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. Can the Minister confirm there is no pharmacy in a Kenner Centre at St. Brelats? And if it's correct, does he think it's reasonable to travel from St. Brelats to St. Helier to get prescription?
Minister.
So when we finally get, I think we require a law change to make, to have a situation where medicines can be prescribed from other pharmacies, but we're working on that as quickly as we can because it is too far a distance and we want medications to be distributed in the community wherever possible.
Supplementary?
Yes, sir. Would the Minister agree that the medical centre and in a Kenner Centre in St. Brelats, it's different from the private pharmacy? Is it anything can be done to provide pharmacy service at St. Brelats before, even in St. Brelats at the first instance, before we are going to the private pharmacies?
Minister.
Very happy to have a look at that, sir.
Thank you. Deputy Dublet.
Thank you, sir. My panel questioned the Minister a month ago on this, and we were told it was a priority, which was reassuring, but we were told that there were complications around finding a solution in this area. Could the Minister please give some detail into what those complications are and what the potential timeline might be for solving them?
Minister.
So I had hoped I'd drawn attention to some of them. The timeline is difficult. It's going to take as long as it takes, and we can only go as quickly as we can go. So I can't put a precise time on it. There are several issues, not least of which pharmaceuticals purchased by external pharmacies are more expensive because the hospital purchasing system brings in those products more cheaply, and they are funded from different sources, and the law doesn't allow, as I understand it, the Health Insurance Fund to subsidise pharmaceuticals from outside of the hospital pharmacy. So those are the issues that we've got to overcome.
Supplementary?
Thank you, sir. I want to zero in on one particular condition, which I know around 250 islanders, potentially more, are facing waits, and that's around ADHD medication, which has to be accessed on a monthly basis due to the controlled substance. Could the Minister look at this area in particular, because it is very much of public interest and the numbers of people that are facing the issues there, to see if there is a solution, a bespoke solution to that area that could be put in place a bit quicker?
Minister.
So, well, I think we're all very aware of the ADHD situation. It has been treated as a priority along with all the other issues with pharmacy, but there's only so much you can do at any given point in time. So,
Deputy Porry.
Thank you, sir. With regards to the long queues for collection of medication, I believe some of the issues have to do with the fact that when the names are called by workers or by the staff, they are not easily identifiable by the patients waiting for their prescription. Can the Minister confirm if patients are asked to bring a documentation with them on the picking up time of their prescriptions? Thank you.
Minister.
I've been caught a little bit off balance. I wasn't aware of that, sir, so I'm certainly happy to have a look at that. Not something I was aware of.
Thank you. Supplementary?
Thank you, sir. Or possibly just change rather than calling people by their own names, have a different system, a number system, which should be much easier to identify. Thank you.
Just thank the Deputy for pointing that out.
Yes. Thank you. Deputy Coles.
Thank you, sir. One of the issues that many patients find, and it was highlighted briefly by Deputy Dublet, that certain medications are controlled and therefore can only be issued at 1 month at a time. Could a practical solution be to allow clinicians at the hospital to prescribe certain medications for more than 1 month at a time to prevent repeat queuing?
Minister.
That's been under discussion, but I don't think that's actually allowed, so.
Supplementary? Thank you. Deputy Talia, final supplementary?
Thank you, sir. Earlier on, the Minister didn't seem to answer my question about systems. So I know that there are certain things out of the Minister's control, but there are things I think he can control. One constituent, sir, told me that there was only one queue when he went to collect his medicine. So there was one queue for handing in your prescription and one queue for collecting the medication, which was the same one. And of course, people were getting confused because they didn't know who was in front of them, and that was a problem with that was leading to longer queues. Would the Minister make sure that there are logical systems in place that are expedited, so that whatever the other problems are, that we have the most efficient system that is workable within the parameters that exist?
Minister.
So I'm not aware that the current system is illogical, but I'll certainly, when I come away at lunchtime, I shall go and make that inquiry.
Thank you, Minister. Question 3, Deputy Doublé will put to the Minister for Health and Social Services. Deputy Doublé. Deputy Doublé.
Apologies, sir, I lost my order paper. Will the Minister please provide an update on the publication of Jersey's maternity strategy?
Minister.
So development of the maternity strategy is nearly complete, and a draft has recently been shared with key stakeholders. These include medical, midwifery and support workers, along with service users and Maternity Voices Partnership. The process will continue, and we'll plan to present firstly to the HCS leadership team during May, with the intention of publishing sometime during June, sir.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. Could the Minister advise of the reasons behind the delay? And also, could the Minister give an indication of perhaps the top 3 findings or recommendations or actions that are in that report?
Minister.
Well, 2 things, sir. I wasn't aware that there'd been a delay, and I haven't yet had a copy sent to our department. So I'm afraid I'm not in a position at this stage to answer that question properly, sir.
Thank you. Deputy Stevenson.
Thank you, sir. Given recent media coverage around an inquest that took place, is the Minister able to take the opportunity to reassure islanders that Jersey's maternity services are safe and fit for purpose?
Minister.
Yes, I believe they are now, sir, yes.
Supplementary. Deputy Gardner.
Would the Minister believe that once he will have questions in the States about maternity strategy, it's just right to read the review that was pre-maternity strategy development, which was published 3 years ago, and be ready to answer our questions?
Minister.
Sorry, sir, I was a little bit confused by that question. Could I ask the Deputy to repeat it?
Absolutely. The Minister was aware that he will be questioned in the States about maternity strategy. Does Minister think it's appropriate to read a review that was done about maternity services 3 years ago, which suggested to write the strategy?
I think in theory that's all well and good, sir. If somebody could find me an extra day in the week to read reports from 3 years ago, I'd be most grateful. At the moment, I'm not able to take on any more than I'm doing, and I've been in post for 10 weeks, so I hope I can be forgiven for not having read every single document relating to every area of health, sir.
Final supplementary. Oh no, sorry, Deputy Kovacs, you had a question.
Thank you, sir. Can the Minister commit that in the new maternity strategy will be a proper assessment of the ongoing needs of the UNICEF Baby Friendly initiative as well, and that the resources allocated would be appropriate to it?
Minister.
On the face of it, yes. As I say, it's not an area that I've had a great deal of time to consider. I will do over the course of time, but in principle, that sounds fine.
Supplementary. Deputy Wilson.
Thank you, sir. Can the Minister just explain, having told us that he knows maternity services are safe, how he's arrived at this conclusion?
Minister.
I've had various conversations with one of the 4 members of the turnaround team, whose specialist area that is, and short of going and standing in the maternity unit for a couple of weeks to see what's going on, I think you have to trust people in these situations. I certainly trust her and the good work that she's been doing.
Supplementary?
Thank you, sir. Has the Minister got any evidence to suggest that maternity services are safe?
Minister.
Evidence that I can produce right here and now, no, sir. But if the Deputy wants further evidence, I'm happy to provide it to her, sir.
Sadia.
Thanks, sir. With regard to the Minister's answer that he doesn't have time to read reports from 3 years ago, that may be the case, but does he not think he could ask his officers to provide summaries of work that's gone on before, those who do have the corporate memory to give a précis of what has happened, or perhaps ask one of his many assistant ministers to also look into those areas?
Minister.
I'm sorry. No, I think we've got to be reasonable. As I say, there are so many hours in a day, and I get a lot of briefings a lot of the time from a lot of very good people, sir. So, no, I'm afraid I make no apology. I haven't covered every area. I shall be looking at maternity in the fullness of time.
Supplementary?
So I think the Minister's misunderstood my intention is that now that he's been appraised of the issue by the Deputy and other members in the Assembly, would he simply go back to his staff, discuss this report that's been alluded to and other matters, and then report back either publicly or privately to those members about whether their concerns are justified?
So I genuinely thought I'd indicated that that's exactly what I was going to do, but if it needs to be stated more clearly, then absolutely.
Thank you, Minister. Final supplementary, Deputy Doublé.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister be able to achieve the necessary funding in order to make our maternity services safe?
So I alluded earlier that I'd be coming back to the Assembly in the coming months on matters of funding to do with health. So I don't think I can say very much more than that. I'm happy to say that I think the health service needs a lot more money than it's got at the moment. So rest assured I will be coming back to discuss that in more details.
Thank you, Minister. Question 4, Deputy Andrews will put to the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development. Deputy Andrews.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister advise what progress is being made to establish a statutory requirement for estate agents to obtain membership of an independent redress scheme?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. So the Regulatory Improvement Team have been preparing a draft policy with the input of the subject matter expert from the Trading Standards team. I'll be considering that policy in more detail next month. I'll be launching a public consultation later this year to invite direct involvement with industry stakeholders. Following that, I hope to be in a position to lodge an amendment to the law by the end of the next year or by the end of this year or beginning of next year. Thank you, sir.
Supplementary. Deputy Brenoff.
Yes, sir. Is the Minister concerned that the intent to capture legislation regarding estate agents may miss out an important area of concern, which is letting agents, not all of whom are estate agents, but where there are concerns that letting agents are engaged in practices? I heard of one where they were charging considerable amounts to find a new tenant for the property when somebody was leaving, when in fact the tenant had actually found the person for them already, but the fee was nevertheless levied. In other words, that there are some disturbing practices in letting agents, and would he agree with me that these also need to be considered with a view to possibly intervening in that area?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. If I remember rightly, during the debate on Deputy Andrews' proposition, I believe letting agents were brought up, but the proposition itself did not address that issue, so it is not something I'm currently looking at. I will, of course, if the Deputy would like to speak to me about that issue, I'll be happy to look into it further.
Supplementary. Final supplementary. Thank you. Question 5, Deputy Alex Curtis will put to the Minister for the Environment. Deputy Curtis.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister advise what consideration, if any, is being given to enabling greater public access to the island's geospatial data, including free access to aerial imagery at the Jersey Library?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Sir, access to free public interest maps and geospatial data is in place using the Government of Jersey web mapping application on the gov.je website, and the mapping team are constantly updating the service to provide a wide range of free-to-use public interest maps. The team are working directly with Jersey Library to install the government's public web mapping application, so it's also easier for islands to access aerial imagery and also the wider range of public interest mapping layers such as Jersey school catchment areas, bridging island plan, countryside access and recycling points, to name a few.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir, and I thank the Minister for sharing the progress. In respect of the Minister's portfolio, does he agree that access to aerial imagery, which is currently too costly for individuals to access, will give a greater equality of arms with regards to planning, enforcement and compliance matters?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. The Deputy and I both share a wide interest in maps, and before I get to answer the specific question he's given, I would say to members that I personally use the States of Jersey mapping pages, where there's over 200 different maps that you can access, and looking at them at the moment: roads by ownership, 3D buildings, the Jersey tree map, there's a heat loss map, there's a natural sites and Helier Ring Road, all on the first page. There's lots and lots to do. But I agree with the Deputy. He was previously an attendee to the Geospatial Board, the mapping service team, and he knows that there is an ongoing issue with the funding. We currently have a situation where all these maps on the website are free of charge, but that people pay for those more valuable pieces of data, and it's the commercial payment that funds the website and the updating it and the free access to the public. And while I accept that some of that important data is really good to get at, it is expensive to create, and at the moment the business model we're using is that more valuable data is paid for, and those payments fund all the other services which provide free access to the public.
Deputy Renouf.
So one of those, I think, more high-value, what you would call high-value data sets would be LiDAR data that has been acquired of the island, which has important scientific value. Does he agree with me that it would be good if we could gain public access to that without payment, as it would further scientific research, for example, in archaeology and so on? And this might be helpful for scientists, academics, and indeed islanders who want to look at these aspects of our heritage.
So I agree, and LiDAR was a really interesting map to look at because it looks through the tree canopy, through the foliage, and shows us some boundaries, field boundaries, that we wouldn't be able to see otherwise. The service team are modernising the website to make it more accessible for the public, and they're going to add places of interest, cycle rack locations, defibrillators, I name a few. But I accept the fact, again, that some of this more valuable data is expensive to create, but I do say to the Deputy, I will go away and look at ways that more of this type can be made free to the public.
Supplementary. Deputy Curtis, final supplementary.
Thank you, sir. The Minister may or may not be aware that revenue from geospatial data has flatlined for many years, and actually, despite continuous pushes to create this as a growing growing financial return, those haven't materialised. Does he agree we need to investigate that actually the economic value of selling the data is overrated, and the economic value of the community having wide and far-reaching access to the data could be far more beneficial in the long run?
Minister.
I'm happy to go away and ask officers to investigate why this has flatlined. It may well be that we haven't publicised it enough. I mean, how many members of the public realise there's over 200 maps available to them, free of charge, with vast, varied interests that can be looked at. So I will ask officers to investigate, and as the Deputy says, if there's a better case to be made for making some of this more valuable data free of charge, a better case for the public, we'll certainly look to do that, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. Question 6, Deputy Iyer, will put to the Chief Minister. Deputy Iyer.
Thank you, sir. Will the Chief Minister advise what progress has been made to introduce a Jersey Public Services Ombudsperson and when the draft legislation will be published? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. The matter is still under consideration by the Council of Ministers, largely due to concern over the high estimated cost of establishing the service and ongoing running costs. Com would like to see our existing complaints process significantly enhanced, and work is being done to address this. When the work has been concluded, we can then consider the rationale for increasing public spending on an ombudsperson scheme and whether legislation is required to support improvements to our complaints handling processes instead, sir. Thank you.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. The Chief Minister mentions the costs. The allocation in the 2022 government plan was for 401,000 in 2023, 412,000 in 2024 and 2025. Does the Chief Minister now think that that was not sufficient? Thank you, sir.
Yes, we don't believe it is sufficient, and that's still a considerable sum of money. I'm advised this would be insufficient to cover the cost of the health-related complaints especially. So it's therefore likely that the cost of the ombudsperson in the budget would be significantly more than budgeted for in the government plan, sir. In addition, public authorities will incur costs in responding to ombudsperson investigations that have not yet been budgeted for in government departments, and that's why we want to have another look at the complaints, the current complaints system, to see if we can improve that to do the job much better value for money. So, thank you.
Deputy Brennan.
Thank you, sir. Does the Chief Minister accept that the Public Ombudsman has widespread support in the public? And does he have any evidence to suggest that that the public have gone off the idea of an ombudsman, which would be sufficient to kill the proposition that is in place to bring forward that?
Well, so we're not looking to kill off the proposition. We have respect for propositions that were approved by this Assembly, and if we did seek to change things, we would probably come back to this Assembly with our propositions. What I am aware of, sir, there is public dissatisfaction sometimes at the way complaints are handled or not handled, simply due to the fact that I think our ongoing process needs to be reviewed. That's no criticism of the current process, but I think it's worth doing a bit of extra work to see if we can find a better balance between what we have and going to the full service of an ombudsperson, which would be costly, sir. But I want to reiterate, we do respect decisions, past decisions of the Assembly, and we'll be bringing whatever we decide back to the Assembly if it doesn't align with the original decision. Thank you.
Supplementary.
So would the Chief Minister commit to trying to discover what the public's views are on a public service ombudsman before bringing forward any rescindment?
I think so. We have to try and reflect the public's views through this Assembly. So I will not undertake to do separate surveys on public views, because we know that the public require and deserve a system, a process where they can express their concerns, and we want to make sure they have that. What we're saying now is that before we commit to a full ombudsperson service, we want to have a closer look at what we do now so we can see if we can improve it. If the Assembly will bear with us, we will do that work. We'll keep them all posted, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Minister. Deputy Wilson.
Thank you, sir. Could the Chief Minister outline just where the areas are that he believes the improvements need to be made, based on his own assessment?
Chief Minister.
Well, sir, I think the biggest challenge we have at the moment is the health service. The Deputy will know that from the work she did there, and of course, current Health Minister and his team giving that priority. So health is probably the biggest area of concern. And then generally, we see complaints from across the public sector, not in too greater volumes. So it's health, and then it's a bit of a general mix, in my opinion. Thank you.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. Does the Chief Minister think that it's a systems issue, or a customer service issue that needs to improve in terms of the experience that people have through responding or engaging with our complaint system as it currently stands?
I think it runs quite a bit deeper than that, sir. There are lots of reasons why people complain, sir. Some is related to customer service, some is related to lack of services, not being able to access the right services, all sorts of reasons. The key actually to solving it is improving our service and our system throughout the public sector, and work is always ongoing to do that. But we do need a better and more effective complaints system, sir. The states previously decided that this would take the form of an ombudsperson, and that could well be the case, sir. But we want to make sure before committing to the costs of that, there's not a better option.
Deputy Sullivan.
Does the Chief Minister not consider that looking around for a better solution sounds awfully like delaying what is a state's decision, and that actually justice deferred is in fact, in this case, justice denied?
I wouldn't quite agree with the justice delayed, justice denied in this occasion, but in short, sir, yes, it is delaying the decision, and we apologise for that. But I think, as I said, sir, fear of repeating myself, we think Council of Ministers would like to explore the possibility of improving an internal complaints process, to make that sufficient before committing to going to a fully fledged ombudsperson. And I undertake, sir, to do that work as quickly as possible, keep the Assembly updated, sir, as soon as we make a decision. We'll either come back to the Assembly with a new proposition or proceed with the existing one. Thank you.
Supplementary?
I love it when Chief Minister says, as quickly as possible. It's such a movable feast. How long before he comes back with a definitive statement, either on the Ombudsman or on an alternative to achieving decent appeal systems?
Chief Minister.
Yes, I apologise, sir. I must try and stop using phrases like that, because actually I agree with the Deputy. They don't actually mean much, and as quickly as possible might not be accurate. But we will be assertive, sir, in our intention to bring this back. I can't put a time scale on it, sir, but I would like to think it will definitely be this year. But I'd rather not put a timescale on it, other than just reassure the Assembly that the work is currently underway, and we will be expedient in delivering. So try not to delay the decision longer than is necessary.
Deputy I, final supplementary.
Thank you, sir. In the Chief Minister's initial response, he mentioned the cost of medical health complaints, but that was not the intention of the original proposition, because the medical health would have its own ombudsman if it was possible. Does the Chief Minister think that this is just an excuse for delay? Thank you, sir.
No, sir.
Thank you. Question 7, Deputy Ward will put to the Minister for Infrastructure. Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. Further to the lodging of the Common Strategic Policy and the priority within it to deliver a plan to revitalise town, will the Minister advise what funding mechanism will be utilised to deliver this priority, and whether this mechanism will include the use of any funding received from the States of Jersey Development Company?
Minister.
Thank you, sir, and I thank the Deputy for his question. So, as part of the Government Plan 2024 to 27, there are allocated funds of up to £5 million identified to fund public realm projects sourced from the Government's capital programme, prior year allocations carried forward in the current plan, and planning obligation agreements, including some relating to the recent States of Jersey Development Company developments on the Esplanade. Proposals for funding mechanisms to deliver the new Government Common Strategic Priorities will be included within the 25 to 28 Government Plan. Thank you.
Supplementary?
Yes, sir. Will the Minister agree to brief the town deputies on the projects planned for St Helier for the next 2 years?
Minister.
I'd be more than happy to do that, sir. The deputy will be aware that my assistant is the Constable of St Helier, and both he and I are looking at the priorities that are currently in train to see whether or not we believe they should be changed at all. We're particularly keen to introduce functional examples where people making it easier for people to walk and cycle within St Helier, and we'd be more than happy to discuss these with the deputies. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Deputy Alex Curtis.
Thank you, sir. Does the Minister foresee the introduction of new street furniture and social spaces within his estate as a priority to enable islanders to create a vibrant St Helier without necessarily having to always spend money or visit retail or hospitality outlets?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Absolutely. So I think the experience that people get when they either visit St Helier or if they live in St Helier is vital for us to maintain and enhance the retail opportunities we have. So the Constable and I are working closely on that, and we've already identified some areas that we'd like to see improvements in. Thank you, sir.
Supplementary?
Thank you, sir. It is a small area, but street furniture for seating in Jersey is woefully lacking for communal seating where members can sit amongst each other and share a longer period of time. Does he see that as an area he can prioritise?
Well, sir, I was recently on holiday with my wife, and my wife commented at the lack of seating in the city we were actually visiting, and I think St Helier actually has quite a lot of seating, but that doesn't mean to say that it can't be enhanced. Only 2 weeks ago, so I was sat on the seat at Snow Hill waiting to go to an appointment, and I found it very relaxing and very interesting sitting there. So we will consider that as well, sir. Thank you.
Stevenson.
Thank you, sir. Given that the Common Strategic Policy refers to youth facilities as well, and there is an existing funding pot for skate parks, which was going to be used towards a St Helier skate park, is the Minister able to confirm that the funding that already exists for a St Helier skate park will remain and continue?
Minister.
Yes, sir. I'm delighted to confirm that the funding remains, and the officers are working tirelessly to try and find suitable locations, not only within St Helier, but in the east of the island for skate facilities. Longer term, sir, we would like to do something much more substantial, but we'd like to try and do something as quickly as we possibly can for those youngsters in particular in the St Helier area.
Thank you. Supplementary. Deputy Ayer.
Thank you, sir. Has the Minister considered having discussions with the 13 St Helier deputies about his plans to revitalise St Helier? Thank you, sir.
So I'd be more than happy, as I said in an earlier answer, to meet with the St Helier deputies and listen to their ideas. And if they've got sites, for example, for the skate park, I'd be delighted to hear from them. A skate park that's achievable in delivering in a short period of time is something that we're really keen on. Thank you.
Supplementary. Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. Have Minister had engagement with the group that worked around revitalising Central Market and area around, and if there are any plans to improve the area?
Minister.
So we have had discussions around the market. The Constable of St Helier is leading on the Central Market for both the Infrastructure Department and the Economy Department. And I believe there's a meeting scheduled for later this week. Thank you.
Supplementary. Deputy Breniff.
So in addition to funding, does the Minister agree that it's important that the revitalisation of town takes place in a context of an overall strategic framework, and that it is important to have some kind of a master plan for what is trying to be achieved in town, and not just pursue haphazard projects?
Thank you, sir. The Deputy raised a very good point. We have so many reports about St Helier and what can be done, particularly around making it easier for walking and cycling, and that is why I refer to looking at priorities. I'm more than happy to, as I said, to join the constable and meet with the deputies and talk to them about those priorities and ensure that they fit with an overall plan. Thank you.
Supplementary?
Can I ask if there is an intention to engage with his colleague, the Environment Minister, and to see whether there is going to be any master planning for St Helier?
So the Environment Minister and myself have a fortnightly formal meeting, but we also have lots of informal discussions. So I'm sure that will come up in our next discussion. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Ward, final supplementary. Thank you. Question 8, Deputy Southern will put to the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development. Deputy Southern.
Thank you, sir. Further to the lodging of the Common Strategic Policy and the flat line in the growth of Jersey's productivity over 30 years now, what measures will the Minister prioritise to improve productivity in each of the retail, agriculture and hospitality sectors?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. So, productivity is at the heart of the Future Economy Programme. My department is currently developing a sectoral productivity review for each of the sectors during 2024. This includes analysis of the current levels and trend, as well as suggested areas of focus that are most likely to impact the relevant sectors. Until this has been done, it is not possible to say exactly what measures will be prioritised as a result. But I can say that we are working very closely with Jersey Business as the government's arm's length organisation, providing direct business support across multiple sectors. This as a specific productivity workstream. This includes such elements as a productivity week focusing on increasing awareness and also practical ways to increase productivity in your business, an annual productivity survey, the productivity circle in which businesses learn from each other, business improvement and leading growth programs, and providing support to individual businesses in receipt of grant funding through the Productivity Support Scheme.
Supplementary?
I believe there I heard one absolute clear fact, which was productivity bonuses attached to the agriculture grants system. Could the Minister give us 2 more, 1 for each of the 3 groups, so that we have some faith that after all the words that are spent on productivity, we'd actually see some progress and improvement?
Minister.
Sir, I have to go back to my first answer, which is that we are currently developing sectoral productivity reviews for each of the sectors that the Deputy asked about in his question. These will be delivered during 2024.
Antonio.
Thanks, sir. Some of the sectors which the Minister is talking about productivity and increasing productivity in other countries will benefit from quite substantial grants or subsidies, possibly from the EU or from their own countries. In the absence of such levers in Jersey, what levers does the Minister have to influence productivity in some of these areas?
Minister.
Sir, we do actually have a grants programme with regard to productivity. It's the Productivity Support Scheme, which provides matched funding. It is limited in scope at the moment, but I am hoping that following the publication of the Common Strategic Policy last week, that we may be able to access more funding for the to improve productivity across a range of sectors, particularly in light of the desire to increase the living wage.
Supplementary?
And so the Minister's often talked about decreasing red tape. Does he identify the qualities that are required to live in Jersey and to access certain sectors and types of work are actually a form of red tape? And could that be one area that actually liberates businesses and employees to be able to do work that they currently can't do?
Minister.
It's a very interesting question, sir. And in one sense, yes, they are red tape, because any processes that a business has to go through which aren't focused on actually that business providing products to sell into the market, anything such as that would be red tape. But some of these elements, such as qualifications, and I understand when the Deputy says qualities, I believe I understand that to mean housing qualifications. they are there for very different reasons. And they are there to, obviously, number one, they're not part of my remit, but they are there to serve different purposes, some of which islanders will wish to maintain, some of which islanders don't wish to maintain. But they are, by the letter, I guess, red tape. But not all of that red tape can be gotten rid of just because it is red tape. Some of it is there to protect the islands in different ways.
Deputy Ayer.
Thank you, sir. Does the Minister believe that giving above inflation pay awards will help to improve productivity? Thank you, sir.
Minister.
Can I believe in asking that question, the Deputy is likely to be talking about public sector pay awards, in which case that has no element on productivity in the private sector, which is the element that I am working towards. In terms of private sector businesses giving above inflation pay awards, of course that is entirely a matter for them, but that can help improve productivity in the sense that it can also drive the business to seek more efficient ways of working as a result of having a higher wage bill.
Supplementary. Deputy Kovac.
Thank you, sir. Has the Minister considered in possibility of increasing productivity on collaborations with different other jurisdictions, and if yes, in what ways?
Minister.
So that's, again, a very interesting question. And other than looking at other jurisdictions for information about what they are doing, very much perhaps in an informal basis, I haven't contacted any other jurisdictions directly in order to learn or share information about that. So yes, I read a great deal about this, and a lot of the things that I read are about productivity gains in other jurisdictions, but I haven't reached out to those other jurisdictions.
Supplementary. Final supplementary, Deputy Sutton.
Thank you, sir. I return to the Minister's first answer, where he seemed to be suggesting that what he was talking about was policy in progress. And I wondered, again, as I often do with the Minister, when that might come to fruition. So when will we see a plan for productivity coming from the Minister this year or earlier?
Minister.
Sir, I have to go back to my answer, which was this year. We will see those plans for productivity gains. But I also wish to point out that certainly in the hospitality sector and also the agricultural sector, they are sectors which have significantly improved their productivity over the last few years. And that is something that I have publicly proclaimed because I believe it is something that we should celebrate. And I congratulate those sectors on doing exactly that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Minister. Question 9, Deputy Catherine Curtis will ask of the Attorney General. Deputy Curtis.
Thank you, sir. In respect to a serious sexual assault offence, will HM Attorney General advise the average time for this type of offence to be investigated and brought to court, and how the victim and their family are kept informed of the status of their case?
Attorney General.
Sir, if I may, I will answer the question in relation to rape cases in 2023 and in 2024 this year to date. Sir, for that time period, the total average time from a complainant in a case of rape being made to the police, or the complaint being made to the police, to trial and disposal in the Royal Court, the average time was 601 days, or about 18 months. So for comparison, in England and Wales, although there are differences in the way that the data is collected, our best estimate is that the total average time from first complaint in a rape case was about 858 days, or 27 months. So specifically as regards the prosecution phase in court, in Jersey in 2023, the average number of days from first charge of a defendant in court to trial and disposal in the Royal Court was 260 days, or about 8 months. whereas in England and Wales, the average time from charge to trial in the Crown Court was 421 days. So for rape cases, the average time currently to investigate and prosecute rape cases in Jersey is about a third quicker than in England and Wales. So as regards keeping the victim and their family informed of the status of their case, so that is done by the police officer in charge of the case and their independent sexual violence advisor if the complainant has consented to having one. So contact between the police and the victim and their family is informed by a victim communication plan. And finally, sir, the police have also recently introduced victim information and support guides, which provide much more information about serious sexual assault investigations and prosecutions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Supplementary?
Yes, thank you. Are there special measures in place to support reluctant or vulnerable witnesses and victims? For example, those with communication difficulties, including guidance in place regarding keeping the family informed?
Yes, so there are special measures in court, so the victim can give their evidence through with the assistance of an intermediary who may be appointed to assist the victim with their evidence. A screen may be put up to shield the victim from the defendant or the public gallery. So there are special measures that the court can take to assist the victim with giving evidence. There are also measures that the police take in terms of achieving best evidence, which allows the victim to give their evidence, which can be video recorded and may, in certain cases, be played in court rather than the victim having to give evidence in chief in a live court case. So that I didn't catch the last part of the Deputy's question, so perhaps you could repeat that.
The last part was just to ask if the families were also kept informed, especially in cases where the victim had communication difficulties, for example.
Yes, sir. As I understand it, the police do have measures to keep the family informed, and particularly in those sorts of cases where the victim may have communication difficulties. It does require the victim to consent to having an independent sexual violence advisor, or an ISVA. So it is dependent on the victim's consent, but the police officer in the case will always be responsible for liaising with the complainant or the victim and the victim's family in appropriate cases.
Breniff.
Yes, sir. The UK court system is widely considered to be, if not in crisis, then certainly troubled, and therefore the comparisons that appear favourable may not be quite as favourable as they appear on the surface. Can the Attorney General indicate whether he feels that the delays that he outlined in terms of bringing court cases to court in Jersey are the minimum that could be expected, in other words, the best that we can do given the complexity and so on of those cases, or does he think that there is considerable room for improvement in reducing those?
Sir, I thank the Deputy for that question. And there's always room for improvement. And yes, the courts in England and Wales do have difficulties, and the investigations in England and Wales have difficulties. In terms of whether there is more that we can do to speed up investigation and prosecution times, that is something that we are always open to. But the times that I've given, particularly for the court phase, are actually, they are good times in the circumstances of dealing with these cases, which are very difficult. They may require forensic evidence, they may require investigation of phones, they may require detailed lines of inquiry with witnesses, and they are incredibly difficult and sensitive cases to have to investigate. It may take time for the victim to be able to give their account. It may take multiple interviews for a victim to be able to give his or her account of their complaint. So whilst, no, we're not complacent about these cases, it is an area that certainly my department has invested, and I think the police as well, have invested a great deal of time and effort in terms of improving our investigation and prosecution rates. They are cases that we take extremely seriously, and we want to achieve the best results that we possibly can, particularly in relation to these cases.
Who wants to volunteer? Whose phone was that? Could you make the normal financial contribution? Yes, thank you. Mr. Attorney.
I'd finished my answer, thank you, sir.
Yes, supplementary?
No, sir, I thank the Attorney General for his answer.
Deputy Curtis, final supplementary?
£10 infraction, but my time went off again.
Yes, that's right. Thank you very much for notifying us of that. Do you have a further question for the attorney?
Just a final supplementary?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I had my light on. I don't know if you saw it.
Well, I apologise. I missed that with the phone business.
I think we all got distracted. So part of my question's been asked by the previous questioner, but does the Attorney General and the department, would they consider benchmarking with jurisdictions other than the UK when it comes to matters of waiting times, etc.?
So the UK and England and Wales in particular is the jurisdiction to which we are closest in terms of our criminal law, our substantive criminal law, and in many respects our procedural law as well. So they really are the closest. Guernsey and the Isle of Man are potential other jurisdictions, but we are open to considering other jurisdictions, other Commonwealth jurisdictions, possibly Australia and New Zealand. They might be other ones. But in terms of collecting this data, that obviously is there is a cost and time element involved in collecting that data, and one has to balance the cost and time involved as against putting the effort into actually investigating and prosecuting these cases. So, which I think is obviously the priority. But we are open to considering other comparators.
Supplementary? Deputy Curtis, your final supplementary.
Thank you. So, is the Attorney General confident that current guidance as described in the Victims and Witness Charter is being upheld and is sufficient to ensure that victims are receiving an appropriate standard of care?
So that question, I think, is perhaps largely directed to the police and to the Minister, perhaps on behalf of the police. As far as my department is concerned, as I've said, we do absolutely everything we can to investigate and prosecute these cases effectively. We do have some contact with victims, though there are strict limits on what we can do in terms of our contact with victims, because it's really confined to familiarising them with the process rather than going into the detail of their evidence. So for my department, certainly I can give that assurance. As far as the police are concerned, we work with the police a great deal in this area. We take a great deal of trouble to have joint training sessions, regular joint training sessions, to help them achieve the best evidence, best investigations that they possibly can. But some of the deputy's question is not just directed at me, it's directed at other investigating and authorities. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Attorney General. Question 10, the Connotab of St Helier will ask the Chair of BPC. Connotab.
Thank you. Will the Chair advise what improvements to the voting system, if any, are envisaged by the committee ahead of the next general election? And what progress, if any, is being made towards achieving any such enhancements?
Yes, the Vice Chair.
Thank you, sir. Aside from a number of small changes to the election law, which the committee will be bringing forward later this year, the main improvement will be the automatic voter registration project, for which this Assembly approved funding in the 2024 government plan. We are about to appoint a project manager to take forward the development and implementation of a digital voter register. This will provide a digital version of the existing register and mean that voters will be able to cast their physical vote at any polling station on election day, as well as making the pre-poll process more mobile and allow for taking the ballot boxes out to the people. Consideration is also being given to using a postal voting system which allows for an automated count whereby the ballots are scanned. This system is widely used across the UK and was utilised very efficiently and effectively in Guernsey in 2021. Thank you.
Thank you. Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. And I welcome the Vice Chair's confirmation that it will be possible to vote in different places, particularly for people who find themselves, for example, in town. They can vote when they're at work and don't have to make that long trip out to the polling station in the distant parishes if it's raining, for example. Does the committee plan to continue with the presence of that very grey candidate, none of the above, who of course ran a couple of members, quite a close run in the last election? Will that option still appear on the ballot paper?
Thank you, sir. In short, yes, that was a decision that was taken by this Assembly on the back of a proposition which I believe the now chair of PPC brought forward herself. So, yes, we don't envision any change unless another proposition or somebody else decides to propose something and this Assembly approves that. Thank you, sir.
Lady Mezek.
Thanks, sir. Does the Vice Chair consider there is any particular reason that elections ought to be held on a Wednesday when there are countries around the world that hold elections on Sundays, and some, in fact, even have them on bank holidays in order to encourage greater turnout? And if the committee hasn't considered such a thing, would she be willing to raise that at the committee for their views?
Vice Chair.
Thank you, sir. This was something that in the previous term, I was on the subcommittee looking at the electoral reforms as a whole. This was something that we did our own research on as well, and we found much the same. I think this is something that we can do. There has been some discussions in the past with the parishes and the parish secretaries. I realise that there are some issues around sourcing volunteers for the count, for example. But I do know that in other jurisdictions, often comparing Madeira, which I have firsthand experience of in Portugal, government employees are normally used and then they are given a day off in lieu, for example. So I think there are options that can be explored and I think that they can now be taken back to the newly constituted PPC. Thank you, sir.
Supplementary. Ms. Morell.
Thank you, sir. With regard to the answers the Vice Chair provided to the main question, would she be able to advise the Assembly as to what impact, if any, she expects matters such as automatic voter registration or being able to vote at different places to have on voter turnout?
Thank you, sir. I think it's got the potential to be a double-edged sword. Obviously, with the automatic voter registration system, our number of eligible voters will obviously increase, which, if we can't get people to come out en masse, may give us data that looks like our voter turnout has actually decreased. And that will be purely because the number of eligible voters will be much more accurate. So that data will be more accurate. I'd like to think that with this facility, this will encourage people to come out and vote because it will be possible to vote anywhere and we can set up different polling stations in different places and be much more responsive to the public and their needs on where they would like to vote and when. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Supplementary. Thank you, sir. With that in mind, obviously we measure voter turnout, and it is often said that what isn't measured can't be managed. But in this case, we do measure it, but we don't manage to increase voter turnout very much at all. Will the Privileges and Procedures Committee be setting targets with this election, aspirational targets for where they would like to see voter turnout rise to? Thank you, sir.
Vice Chair.
Thank you, sir. I think that's difficult given that the kind of richness of our data in the past to be able to make comparisons with any past voter turnout figures. I do think it's important to have targets, absolutely. And I think that this may come under the work of the subcommittee that was that's been made permanent now, which I set up, which was the political awareness and education. And I think there's a place for that committee to do some work around obviously engaging the public and making sure that they're aware. But I think that is something that we could definitely consider looking at targets and how we can use the data that we collect to do that. Thank you, sir.
Fair enough.
So currently we are, I think, bottom of the league in terms of voter turnout, and the Better Life Index drags down our performance in the Better Life Index, and one target might be to come off the bottom. But I would like, given the seriousness of this and given the fact that it is seriously embarrassing for the island that we have such a low turnout, can the Vice Chair say with certainty that these changes of which she's spoken, including increasing the number of polling stations, will those actually be in place for the next election?
I'd like to be able to confidently say yes. Obviously, I can't because we are still in the process of appointing a project manager, for example. I will say this, however, I do feel that in the past there has been a lack of push from within the government. And this is something that I have addressed with the Chief Minister, and he has agreed that as in my role as Assistant Chief Minister, that I will be given the responsibility for doing what I can to increase civic engagement from that angle. One example that I will give from past governments is that, for example, that the government Facebook page has over 10,000 followers, and during our last election there was only one post that was shared throughout the whole time about registering to vote and election day. And I think for a government page that has such a big reach, I actually think that's really disappointing, and I'd like to see that change for the next election. Thank you, sir.
Supplementary. Deputy Tellier.
Thank you, sir. Which of the following does the Vice Chair think will come first? Online voting, the new hospital, a tunnel to France, or the second coming of our Lord?
I'm not sure I'm sufficiently qualified to answer that question, sir.
So it's just in the absence of the Dean, I thought we may ask that. There is a more serious question here, is that Jersey supposedly prides itself on being a digital island. We know that we have something called Digital Jersey, but we also know that we're told we've got the fastest broadband fibre speeds maybe in some parts of Europe, if not the world. What's the point in having all of this if one of the very basic things that I think the public want to do is to be able to vote at their convenience? And so what steps is PPC taking to seriously move forward the issue of allowing people in the 21st century to be able to vote online?
I think the issue of voting online and voting digitally are two very different things. There are all kinds of security issues that come with voting online, which is around verifying people's identity and so on. We are aiming for a digital offering instead, which will be much more secure and will ensure that people are who they say they are when they're casting that vote, which I think is really important. Obviously, in an ideal world, with everything working perfectly, I think we would love to have online voting. At the moment, our first step is to get that centralised automatic voter electoral roll, which will enable us to, at the very least, vote at every polling station in a more digital manner as opposed to online. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Rob Ward.
Thank you, sir. So one of the many excellent opportunities created by the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, which I would encourage all members to be part of, is to observe and train as an election observer. I did this myself, and in observing the Isle of Man elections, one of the things they trialled in their capital, Douglas, was a system of voting in any polling station for the constituencies involved. Would the Vice Chair be interested, or has the committee spoken to those who trialled that to see whether this could be an option for St Helier, for example, or other parishes, given that we have the joined up parishes now in voting? Thank you.
Vice Chair.
Thank you, sir. I understand that this is absolutely an option. I don't recall whether we have spoken to any other jurisdictions about this, but I think we have spoken to election observers when they've come to do their when they came to do their reviews and their observations. I think this is something that would definitely be possible in St Helier. Maybe that may be the better option to start with, but I think the Deputy has raised a good point, and I think it is definitely worth us talking to other jurisdictions about their experiences and learning from them. Thank you.
Deputy Scott.
So, continuing on the theme about how to improve voter turnout, there have been a number of reports commissioned by the PPC in the past, including the Comres report in 2015, which indicated that one of the reasons why, or some of the reasons why islanders weren't voting were things such as they believed it didn't make any difference, and the quality of the candidates. And I'm wondering if the PPC is pushing forward with any proposals to improve matters in those respects.
Vice Chair.
Thank you, sir. I think with regard to the quality of candidates, I think that's very much subjective. I think obviously we have things like the Diversity Forum, which help push and educate and enable those in our community who may be less reluctant to come forward, to stand for election. I think this has had a real positive effect. I know that a couple of people within our assembly today actually attended one of those events that the Diversity Forum put on to encourage candidates to stand. I can't remember what the other part of the question was. Sorry, sir.
It was the makes no difference.
Yes, sir. I think that as a whole is around probably raising political education and awareness about how every vote makes a difference. I know there's often an infographic that goes around election time where it shows that sort of 2/3 of people are saying that, and that those 2/3 of the people would have made a massive difference. And I think it is around also around that and kind of pushing that message out that every vote does make a difference. We see it in this assembly all the time when we have very close votes, and I don't think that's always translated into the public. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Supplementary?
Yes, I just wondered whether the PPC has considered actually looking into what is meant by these things, because it seems like there might be assumptions about what is meant by not making a difference and what is meant by poor quality of candidates, and whether therefore the PPC will actually drill down deeper into what the public thinks about this and why they are not voting.
Thank you, sir. We did have some focus groups that were kindly conducted by Dr. Christopher Pitch from Nottingham. He was at Nottingham Trent University, he's now in Nottingham. We have some very rich data that came out of those focus groups. Obviously, with the we've also got the Joel survey again this year, so there are some questions that we've had some input into for that survey. I think that there's always work to do around that, and hopefully now that we've re-established PPC and its subcommittees, we'll be able to push through with some of the to combat some of the findings that we've found about what people think and address those misconceptions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Deputy Miller.
Thank you, sir. At the more extreme end of the scale, has the committee considered compulsory voting?
Vice Chair.
Thank you, sir. This was again something that was looked at in the last term with that the electoral reforms subcommittee. At the time, the committee weren't completely sold on the idea. I think it's always something that we should maybe keep in mind and how we would manage that. I know that Australia have a system of compulsory voting, but they can still opt out. So I think it's something to keep in mind, I think, for the future. Thank you, sir.
Supplementary. Deputy Kovacs.
Thank you, sir. Continuing on what Deputy Rob Ward mentioned about the collaboration with Commonwealth Parliamentary Association and also including the Assemblée Parlementaire de la Francophonie and beyond, has the committee considered wider collaboration or more closer collaboration with different jurisdictions where systems that work well for online registration or even gathering statistical data are working well, and in what way those could be replicated here? Have these kind of discussions took place anywhere?
Vice Chair.
Thank you, sir. Yes, so we are continuously doing research in the background and speaking to I know that our Grefia speaks to other Grefias in other jurisdictions. We've especially been talking to Guernsey following their increase in their voter turnout and how they've gone about it. So we do research. We are continuously doing research. I think there's always room for improvement, and there's always jurisdictions that we can take ideas from, and we are happy to hear from people, obviously, if they've got any ideas or if they know of any systems that are working in certain ways elsewhere in the world that we can get in contact with and ask for some feedback on. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Supplementary. Deputy Southern.
Will there still be a requirement to show ID in Jersey voting?
Thank you, sir. So the law doesn't specify that there has to be photographic ID. Obviously, I am really conscious that there are people in our community who don't possess a driving licence or a passport and therefore do not necessarily have photographic ID. The law does state that that as long as the identity of that person is verifiable, I think it is, or something along those lines, by somebody within the electoral authority. And there has been cases in the past where I believe that people from the parish have been able to confirm other people's identities, for example. We also had something, I remember in the last election, I think somebody wanted to use their Yoti, and they weren't sure whether they could, and then we found out that they could. So generally speaking, we don't intend on changing that part of the law. There was some negative feedback around that when it was suggested in the UK, because it served as a disincentive to some. Thank you, sir.
Supplementary.
Yes, yeah, I think the correspondent is correct when she says the requirement for photo ID does institute a reason why you shouldn't vote, or a reason on the day why you shouldn't vote. And I think it's important that we get this correctly identified in order to proceed.
I'm not sure there was a question there, but I will say that I agree, and I think there probably needs to be maybe clearer guidance, and we can probably ask the this is maybe something for the Jersey Election Authority to consider, for example. But the experience in the UK was not a positive one when this was trialled. Thank you, sir.
Final supplementary, Conor Tarpson-Hillier.
Thank you, sir. And I'm grateful to the Vice Chair for her responses and to many members for their interest in the subject. I suppose it's a bit early to ask the question, but I'm sure some members some people in here and some people out there would like to put the date in their diaries of the next general election.
Vice Chair.
Thank you, sir. So as things stands, there's no change has been made to the law and the election would be due in June 2026. The Assembly can appoint the day by Act. However, the committee has agreed to consider the timing of the next election following a request from, I think, Deputy Aya at the first meeting of the new PPC committee. We are mindful that any changes would need to be enacted sufficiently far ahead of the next election. Otherwise, the terms of office of this Assembly will need to be extended, and that would not be democratic. So as it stands, sir, with no changes being made to the law, it is due June 2026. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Question 11, Deputy Sutton will put to the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development. Deputy Sutton.
Thank you, sir. Following the publication of the latest earnings and income statistics, will the Minister advise how he intends to address the increasing income inequality and to deliver economic well-being in an inclusive way for all islanders?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Sir, the strategic and long-term aims set out in the Future Economy Programme are underpinned by the theme of fairness. We aim to grow our economy in an inclusive way that benefits all islanders. Delivering against these principles is something I seek to influence through the Council of Ministers, as other ministers are accountable for many of the policies that address income inequality. As an example, I'm working closely with the Minister for Social Security to deliver this government's commitment to introducing a living wage. Sir, I am also re-establishing the Cost of Living Ministerial Group. This group works to mitigate the cost of living, especially for those most affected by rising costs. So the group has yet to meet under this new government, and the role and remit will be fully decided at that meeting. But my hope is that it will build on previous work and work to help those most affected by the cost of living in Jersey. So it's also worth mentioning that common strategic policy interventions already have the potential to support reducing inequalities through policies delivered by other ministers, such as the minimum wage becoming a living wage, housing, childcare and skills, sir.
Thank you. Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. Is the Minister aware that the lowest quintile in terms of after housing costs saw their income increase by 7% in nominal terms and decrease by 23% in real terms? What is the Minister prepared to do to correct this drop in the income of the bottom quintile, the poorest in our society?
Minister.
Sir, the Deputy is correct, and it is an all-of-government approach that is needed to address these inequalities. It's not a single minister that has responsibility for all of it, because this is, as the Deputy I'm sure is aware, housing costs are a significant part of the issue with regard to income inequality, with those people in the lower quintiles having to spend a higher amount of a high proportion of their income on housing. And so that in itself is one example which shows how we do need a whole-of-government approach. As I mentioned, the common strategic policy, through the living wage policy, through housing policies, through the greater provision of childcare, and through greater provision of skills training, is aiming to deal with these issues across the whole of government.
Yes. Vittorio.
Does the Minister agree with the underlying premise of the question that income inequality or an increase in income inequality is in itself a problem? That is to say, does he think it's a problem if the rich are getting richer at a quicker rate than the poor are getting richer?
Minister.
Sir, I believe an excess of inequality is a problem, sir. That's correct. I believe there will always be a level of inequality. That is, there will always be higher earners and there will always be lower earners, sir. So there is a level of inequality that people are comfortable with and societies are comfortable with. But when that inequality becomes excessive, then it does become a significant problem and can drive social issues which become detrimental to the well-being of society. So.
Supplementary.
In terms of the effort that government expends, and perhaps his own department, in on the one hand, ensuring that there are more and more super wealthy people that come to the island, presumably that would drive the top end of inequality, and on the other hand, the amount of effort that it spends on trying to increase the income of those at the bottom end. Which does he think the government is more comfortable and more successful at doing?
Minister.
So I believe that in this government we are addressing the lower end through the minimum wage and becoming living wage policies. I believe that is a significant change and is one that this government is doing so.
Final supplementary, Dr. Sutton.
Will the Minister set targets to demonstrate this increase in incomes by setting targets, say, for the Gini coefficient, which in this report has gone up from 0.38 to 0.43 significantly, and the 90-10 ratio as a measure. Will he set these targets?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Yes, the 0.43 Gini coefficient is after housing costs. Before housing costs, it is less than that. But that shows just how housing costs drive that inequality in the island, sir. I think that is a discussion that has to be had across the whole of government, because there is no one single minister responsible for income inequality, sir. And so the discussion about whether we should have targets on that should be a council of ministers discussion. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Minister. Question 12, Deputy War will ask of the Minister for Infrastructure. Deputy War.
Thank you, sir. Sorry, I managed to lose my question just as I... Sorry, sir, I just lost it just there. So. Oh, can you... Thank you, Steve. Further to the 2013 report, St Helier Parking Needs Study, will the Minister advise what consideration, if any, is being given to address the perception that there is insufficient shopper parking in town?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. And, sir, providing parking for shoppers is of course important for the vitality and economic success of the town centre. Therefore, infrastructure is currently developing policy that specifically considers the different user demands for parking in town, including shopper parking. The work, which began last year, is taking a comprehensive approach to ensure that we manage and develop the public parking estate effectively, both now and into the future. A key thread of this work is going to be how we manage the different demands for parking, for example, so that more long-stay worker parking is provided around the town while keeping sufficient capacity in the town centre to support the retail and leisure activity, etc. A specific case in point is the new Charles Street car park, which will provide a further 137 short-stay 3-hour spaces when opened in early May.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. I'm sure the Minister's aware this report costs the taxpayers £15,000, and I'm sure he doesn't need to be reminded of his commentary about indefensible use of taxpayers' money. When does he intend to bring his hopefully less costly strategy to the Assembly?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. And no, sir, I don't need to be reminded about use of taxpayers' money. It's something I continually remind the officers within the department about, and the need to do things quickly and speedily, but also to good effect. So what we need to do is look at what information is available to us and look at the changes. So we have a hopper bus, which nobody's been told about. So in May, we will be promoting that hopper bus. We currently have 24% of St Helier residents who work in town driving to work. So providing more spaces is not the answer by itself. It is about a combination of efforts that we need to work together on. Thank you, sir.
Deputy.
Thanks, sir. Would the Minister draw attention to those who would like to be able to park in town more easily to the great vacancy rate that there is at Pier Road, which is a car park which is very close to the town centre, albeit that the small hill that, in between the car park and town often seems to get exaggerated in terms of difficulty and distance. So would he take steps to remind people that there are lots of spaces on a day-to-day basis at Pier Road?
Minister.
Thank you, sir, and I thank the Deputy for that prompt, because he's absolutely correct in saying there are spaces regularly at Pier Road in good number. Sir, parking in St Helier has been impacted recently by the essential works that have been carried out at Patriotic Street over recent months. Those works were suspended during the Christmas period, but those works are hopefully going to be completed very shortly and will free up more spaces that are needed. Sir, some 2 weeks ago I wrote to the bailiff about the possibility of using Vine Street for disabled drivers if we can find a suitable alternative to Durat's parking. And sir, that was before a letter was published in the JEP, but I fully support the letter that was written to the Jersey Evening Post.
Supplementary? Deputy Alex Curtis.
Thank you, sir. The Minister in Jersey Property Holdings has a planning application from 2022 for a lift to Fort Regent that would result in the loss of 28 car and 78 motorcycle spaces. Without prejudice to the planning merits and determination of that application, is the Minister still pursuing the development? And if so, does he have plans to replace any potential loss of town shopper spaces that would arise?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. There's no current action being taken on that application. It's interesting that the Deputy mentions motorcycle parking, sir, because one thing that I've noticed is the lack of covered motorcycle and cycle parking that's available to people in St Helier, and I think that is one area that I've asked the team to look at to see if we can actually increase the amount of motorcycle parking rather than reduce it. Thank you, sir.
Supplementary? Deputy Ayer.
Thank you, sir. Has the Minister considered providing free shopper parking in St Helier on Saturdays to encourage people to come into town? Thank you, sir.
Minister.
I haven't, sir. The only free parking that I have considered is that which could be attached to a park and ride scheme, which I'm in discussions with an environmental group about trialling in St Brelade's. Sir, as part of my induction, I recently spent time with parking control team, walking the streets with an officer. So they pride themselves in helping town function. And I'd like to pay tribute to those people who do their job. It's certainly not easy, sir, but they do their very best in ensuring that unloading bays, disabled discs, etc. aren't abused. And I pay tribute to those people. Thank you, sir.
Supplementary? Deputy Coles.
Thank you, sir. With the new serial remark on flats that have just come online by Andium, there is a public car park provided within that complex. Would the Minister think it desirable to see large-scale developments like that include public parking in the future?
So there are 138 spaces which are going to be available to the public in that development. And I think, sir, we need to look at not necessarily new developments, but existing developments that may have capacity in the first case, and that's something that we're working, the Constable of St Helier, myself and officers are working on to try and identify what existing capacity that may become available to the public. Thank you, sir.
Supplementary? Final supplementary, Deputy War.
Thank you, sir. And I've just been reminded that in his answer to my written question about Kensington Place, and the non-sort of reopening of that site for parking, there just seems to be some inconsistency in terms of, and this comes back to my point about there being a plan for St Helier, is why is that not considered, given the long-term nature of this hospital development, why is that not being reconsidered for further shopper parking? Surely that's got to be to the benefit of all businesses in that area.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I think the answer to the written question was quite clear, in as much as the site is that of a health site, and what I don't want to do is to delay any works that may be required to take place there. My personal view, sir, is that whilst we did the work in Patriotic Street, it would be an ideal site to do that, to use that in the short term. I think once you get a car parking space in town, it's much harder to remove it. So I stuck with the advice I was given, and we didn't do it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Minister. Question 13, Deputy Tadier will put to the Minister for Infrastructure. Deputy Tadier.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister advise whether a reduction in the speed limit at La Poulante and on Mont de La Poulante will be implemented this year, and if not, why not?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Thank the Deputy for his question. So I can confirm it is the intention for a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit to be introduced on Mort de la Polante. The aim is for this change to occur by summer, by the end of July. Thank you, sir.
Can I thank the Minister for that? I know that it's been a recurring theme for a lot of the residents of the area and users of the area. Will the Minister just maybe clarify that how residents will be informed and that actually this should be able to be done quite smoothly with consultation having been taken already?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. So one thing that springs to my notice is the length of time it takes us from the time we start a consultation on a speed limit review, for example, to the time we actually make a decision and implement it. Clearly, there are a number of processes to follow, and for example, in this case, it needs to be part of a speed limit order amendment, and that includes other parishes, other roads in St Wands and St Mary changes. I know from my own experience in St John that the length of time it takes, and I'm trying to encourage officers to think about the customer, the people, the public who have requested these things to happen, and how we can deliver things quickly or more quickly whilst following process. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Conor Thompson-Brillard.
Thank you, sir. Would the Minister confirm that in any speed mitigation, the raised table may be considered at La Polante, given that signage on its own generally doesn't work, and the recent loss of a large tree in the area after the storms has created a position which would lend itself very well to a table that I mentioned. Thank you, sir.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. I thank the Constable for his question. I'm not sure if a raised table has been considered in this area, but it's a question I will ask officers, and I will get back personally to the Constable. Only recently I stood with another Constable watching traffic where a raised table was in place, and I think a lot depends on the height of that table as to the effectiveness of them. Thank you, sir.
Supplementary. Deputy Renouf.
Thank you, sir. And a similar theme. First of all, I'd like to thank the Constable, the Minister, for the update on that, which will be welcomed by residents. Is the Minister confident that the resources exist to enforce the speed limit in that area?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. So it's like every speed limit, sir. The Deputy is absolutely right. It's all about enforcement. And I had a very productive meeting with the Justice and Home Affairs Minister and officers from her department and my department recently about implementation of speed detection. And we also had a very useful presentation at the Community de Connétable. So I'm confident that progress is being made in that area. But I would invite the Deputy to come and stand with me in my garden any Sunday from 7:30 in the morning, sir, and he'll realise the problem is not limited to St Brillards. Thank you, sir.
Supplementary. Final supplementary.
Simply to ask if the Minister will convey my thanks to the officers in the department. I know that they've been very responsive and they juggle with a lot of competing needs, so will he convey that on behalf of the parish deputies and maybe the parish itself?
I'd be delighted to do so, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Question 14, Deputy Renouf will put to the Minister for Health and Social Services. Deputy Renouf.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister provide a timetable for the appointment of a new chair of the Health and Community Services Advisory Board?
Minister.
Sir, given that the Assembly is due to review the board arrangements in the spring of 2025, and the fact that the recruitment process for the new chair will take approximately 3 to 4 months, I've decided not to proceed with recruitment at this point in time. If a person were to be appointed, they'd only have a contract period of around 9 months, and this would probably be too short a period to be attractive to candidates. That said, I'm pleased to report that the former acting chair has agreed to chair the board meetings going forward, and she and the remaining non-executives have very kindly offered to share the workload of the chairperson between them. This will be of great benefit, sir, as I very much value their contributions, and I'm pleased to say that they support the actions that I've taken to date. Thank you, sir.
Supplementary.
Sir, I'm still digesting that, but the Minister was one of those who voted against the establishment of the Health Board in June 2023, as did his entire Assistant Minister team, the current Environment Minister, the Infrastructure Minister, the Children's Minister, and indeed the Chief Minister. The Minister has now got rid of the first permanent chair of the board and says he doesn't intend to replace him for over a year. Can he reassure the public that he is not simply trying to get rid of the board and remains committed to the decision of this Assembly to set up a board as an essential mechanism for driving up standards of healthcare in Jersey?
Minister.
Yes, sir, I'm very happy indeed to confirm that, and I'd just remind the Deputy of the reasons that I was sceptical about the board. I made it plain at the time that I didn't object to a board at all, but I just thought that the single point of failure in having that board reporting to the Health Minister only wasn't acceptable, and that's a matter that I intend to address as soon as I can, sir.
Dublé.
Is the Minister planning any other changes to the terms of reference or the remit of this board?
Minister.
No, sir.
Supplementary.
Does the Minister support the continuation of this board?
Minister.
So I thought I'd made that plain in my initial response.
So I'm not suggesting this is the case in any way, but perception is an important issue when it comes to accountability of government. Could there be a perception out there that the Minister might want a board that is compliant? And then if that is the case, does that then bring into question the whole purpose of the board in the first place?
Minister.
The Deputy is quite right. There could be that perception, but that would be entirely incorrect, sir.
And so what would the Minister do to try and allay that very real possibility of a perception in the public in his communication strategy? I mean, he's just told us about this, I think, this morning in a fairly shock announcement. Will he be making a statement, a public statement about this to reassure the public that checks and balances in the hospital are fully in place?
Minister.
So I hadn't intended to make a public statement on it, and I don't think I will. This is just one particular incident. I made it plain in my initial response that the remainder of the board are very constructive and collaborative. I'm enjoying working with them, and I hope that the same can be said in reverse. So I don't have any issues. The board's functioning perfectly well, and I hope the media might report on the comments that I'm making here, sir.
Deputy Stevenson.
Thank you, sir. It's my understanding that there is a further vacancy on the board, which is for an individual who's with specific experience to do with finances. Perhaps could the Minister just confirm that for me, please? And confirm, does this leave 2 vacancies? Will either of them be filled going forward?
Minister.
Yes, indeed, we are looking to fill the finance vacancy, and with a bit of luck, that might be achievable with somebody local, if all goes well, sir.
Supplementary.
Yes, sir. I just wonder what thinking has been done about why a chair is not needed for the board when there are certain criteria set out that there should be individuals who have specific skills in finances and in public health arenas, and I think the terms of reference specify it. There's a clear terms of reference that it should be led by a chair. What consideration, formal consideration, has been given to how that can just be got rid of?
Minister.
Well, sir, I wasn't aware that I had got rid of it. The lady that has agreed to carry on chairing has chaired it very successfully for 6 months, and she's a perfectly well qualified lady, sir.
Gardner.
Thank you, sir. Minister mentioned that the other members of the board are collaborative. Does it mean that they are agreeing with what Minister decided?
Minister.
Not necessarily, sir, no.
Supplementary.
If Minister able, according... Apologies, sir. So in this case, can the Minister explain what's happened during the 5 weeks from Minister announcing exceptional understanding of the health service delivery for Mr. Hayhoe, and within 5 weeks the Minister Hayhoe disappeared?
So, two things. I don't think this question really relates remotely to my timetable for appointing a new chair. It may do, but I can confirm that I've made an arrangement with Mr. Hayhoe that we'd say nothing further, and I intend to stick to that. There was an arrangement that we made, and I don't intend to break that, sir.
Yes. Final supplementary.
Yes, the previous chair was quoted as saying that the minister needs to learn to listen to people more, and I'm not the only one who struggles to work with him. Is the minister concerned that it will be hard to find a suitable high-calibre replacement for the chair when he finally gets round to doing it, given this reputation?
Minister.
The Deputy raises a very interesting point, sir. I picked up on what was said, so I emailed Mr. Hayhoe to ask him if
he... Can we remind ourselves of Standing Order 104, which I should have mentioned earlier on. A member of the States must not refer to an individual who is not a member of the States by name unless it's unavoidable. So,
apologies to the chair, the former chair. Yes, I emailed the former chair when I heard that comment made on the television and in writing by the BBC. I was ensured by the former chair that those comments shouldn't have been attributable to him, and I've been assured by the BBC that they should. So that's ongoing, and I'm trying to get to the bottom of where those comments came from, sir.
Thank you, Minister. We now
So could I ask, just for clarification on the point, is he worried that his reputation will make it difficult for a chair to be appointed?
Yes. Minister?
That's a very difficult question to answer, sir. I mean, that could well be the case. The fact that we're not intending to advertise for the time being should leave a certain period of time during which it will become apparent that the board is fully functional. So in the longer term, I don't see that being a problem, sir.
Thank you, Minister. Question 15, Deputy Doublé will put to the Minister for Education and Lifelong Learning. Deputy Doublé.
Thank you, sir. Further to the recently lodged Common Strategic Policy and the priority to extend nursery and childcare provision, will the Minister please advise members of the proposed timetable and funding mechanism to move towards a universal offer for 2 to 3 year olds?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. So as the Deputy will know, the current government plan says that we will review feasibility options for expanding early years nursery provision and childcare support to benefit all children in Jersey from 9 months to 3 years old, with a report detailing any action plan from the government to be presented to the States Assembly before the 1st of September 2024, and any financial implications forming the government plan 25. That's on page 10, sir. So the action of the intended government plan was unlikely to appear until September 24. So I hope that we can speed this up. So I've already engaged officers to explore definitive options, definitive options to extend nursery provision via pilot schemes. If there is any way to have this in place by September, rather than only the plan to do so, it will be acted upon. So, sir, my timetable is as soon as possible. Nearly 2 years has been spent in consultation and round tables with stakeholders that produced a very valuable ISOS report. I know the Deputy observed one of these sessions. But sir, to extend further, we will need to secure funding for future government plans, which is driven by the commitments made in the draft CSP and the CSP that has been agreed by the Council of Ministers. So we will need cross-sector approach to extend provision to give a universal offer, and I will work as hard as I possibly can to try and extend that offer as quickly as possible. So we have 2 years remaining in this Assembly. I want to see significant changes to provision in this time, and to be able to announce a universal provision of some form in the time span, is my target. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Minister. Supplementary.
I thank the Minister for the answer, and I'm pleased to see that the priority is being maintained in this area. So it was my intention to secure funding, and indeed this had the informal backing of the previous Council of Ministers for a universal offer for at least 15 hours of nursery care for 2 to 3-year-olds. Obviously, this is not something that is within my control now, but can the new Minister confirm that he will be able to secure at least 15 hours of nursery care on a universal basis for 2 to 3-year-olds?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. So, yes, that would be the intention, 15 hours. But, sir, I do not, and I will not, offer 15 hours of universal care when the provision is simply not there. That makes false promises to parents. This is what's happened in the UK, and there is now a real disillusionment amongst parents in the UK. So, instead, we will be working incredibly hard to try and make sure that provision is available, and then we can offer that universal provision of 15 hours. And so I hope that can be successful. At the beginning, if we target well, we show the value of it. We have a lot of work to do across sector. And so I want to say, and I wrote a few things down, and I've highlighted this one. I want to underline to this Assembly that I value all of the sectors and want to see us work together to deliver what we want, which is, in the end, sir, the best start for children we can possibly give them.
Deputy Stevenson.
Thank you, sir. Are there any plans to consider changing the staff-to-child ratios in an attempt to create more capacity in the system? And does the Minister believe this is a safe and sensible approach to take?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. And I've heard people frequently say, I thank the Deputy for the question. I genuinely mean I thank you for this question, sir, the Deputy, because actually, no, we do not want to do that. We need to provide a provision across this island which is safe and the best possible vision it can be. It was one of the fallout, sir, of making a universal offer elsewhere that could not be reached, which meant the only solution for nurseries was to increase the numbers of children per member of staff, which I think is the wrong thing to do. It takes away from the quality of the care that is needed for our children, and it takes away, and can, sir, and I'm not saying this is the case, but it can, sir, reduce safety for those children. That's the last thing that we want to do.
I'm very glad to hear that. Thank you, Minister. In which case, how else does the Minister propose to increase provision?
Thank you, sir. And I put down my notes because I've been working on this so much I can just answer. So we have to be very creative in the way that we offer increase the provision. The first thing we need to do is increase the understanding and the value of the early years sector in terms of care and the people who train to do that. There are, I believe, 67 young people, I think most of them are young people coming through the training at Highlands this year, and it will take time for them to be into the system. We also need to be creative, sir, because there is a section of our community out there who may not want to work full-time, but maybe, I'll use the word older, sir, advisedly, being perhaps an older person myself, but may want to return to the workforce and have skills bringing up their own children. With focused training, intelligent approach to that sort of training, we can extend that provision in many, many ways. So that's one of the things I want to do. We need to look creatively at the way in which we can extend the numbers of people working in this very, very important sector for this island.
Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. I'm sure the Minister is aware that we have almost 150 free spaces at school nurseries. At the end of 2023, several schools expressed interest to take part in the pilot, which will offer wraparound care after school, which will allow, hopefully, to have more capacity in the private nurseries, that more people will sign into the schools nurseries where we do have capacity. Can Minister confirm that this pilot will go forward in primary schools? We talk about between 3 to 5 primary schools that expressed interest.
Thank you, sir. Yes, so actually there's 188 places in the primary schools. The pilot that was talked about was I don't think ever really enacted upon, but yes, that's exactly the type of interaction that we have to do. And I know that we've had a conversation with head teachers who are very willing to enter into those sorts of arrangements to extend the hours of their nurseries, but to do so in the best way they possibly can. And what I see, sir, is we need to work across our providers, both the state sector, the private sector, the charity sector, the third sector, if you like, and others who provide nursery care to be creative on this island. We're a small island, but we need to have this provision in place for people and their children. And so the sooner we can do that and get people working together, the better. And indeed, so if we can get a project up and running for September, it is very likely to be exactly that type of model. Thank you, sir.
Supplementary? Final supplementary, Deputy Doublé.
Sir, in the CSP, although the nursery and childcare provision was at the top of the agenda in that document, which I was pleased to see, I was disappointed to see that the word quality was not in that section. The Minister has spoken about quality today. Could he confirm that any universal offer that is extended to families, that he will maintain that principle of equality and, if necessary, inject additional funding, not just for the spaces, but also for raising the quality of care that is delivered to our children?
Thank you, sir. So can I just check, did the Deputy say quality or equality? Quality. So the reason the word is not there is because, for me, it goes without saying. So we aren't going to provide, there is no way, sir, that I would put my name to anything that reduces the quality of care for our young people. So my children went to nurseries and we had that horrendously difficult balance between work, getting the children to nursery, getting them home, and we were, as most parents, absolutely obsessed with the quality of the delivery of care that they had. So we're corporate parents, and I take that very, very seriously. And as a corporate parent, I don't think we should even be considering that we have to put the word quality in there, because as a corporate parent, that's all that we would do for our own children, and therefore we would do for the children across this island, sir.
Thank you, Minister. Question 16, Deputy Andrews will put to the Minister for Education and Lifelong Learning. Deputy Andrews.
Thank you, sir. Following the adoption of P116/2022, will the Minister advise what progress, if any, has been made in creating a new skills development fund, and how many individuals, if any, have benefited from this fund?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Again, from the government plan that we've inherited on page 88 and 89, sorry, 99 and 98, I'll get my references correct, sir. It does say the government will establish a skills development fund that uses for current budgets for this purpose and contributions from philanthropists, got that word out, sir, 21Es, etc. To avoid delay, in 2024, this will form part of the site development heads of expenditure. So I understand that a formal fund was not established by the previous government for specific reasons in terms of it being simpler to not do so. I can't account for the actions of the previous government. However, sir, a new skills development fund, formerly the Business Licence Skills Fund, was established at the beginning of 24 to meet the objectives of the Skills Development Fund, and monies have been put aside for a number of projects. So to answer the second part of the question, and I've highlighted the answer separately, nearly 50 individuals have already benefited, and it's anticipated there will be more applications and the delivery of sector-specific training courses during the remainder of the year. So there have been some actions taken. Thank you, sir.
Supplementary?
Yes, please, sir. Does the Minister envisage any changes will be made for future years to the Skills Development Fund to provide islanders with upskilling and reskilling opportunities?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. And yes, I would say to the Deputy, so one of the things I tried to add to the remit was this notion of lifelong learning, because we have to address that. And so this will become incorporated into a much wider piece of work into lifelong learning. And indeed, sir, having separate funds does show that we're separating this notion away from our everyday work, and I wonder whether it should be integral to what we do in terms of education, not just up to the age of 18, although that's still not compulsory, but we're working on that, but beyond into our lifelong learning, so that we skill people on this island as is appropriate for need. So I will say to the Deputy, in terms of the individual accounts that was mentioned and amended into 7 parts of the committee, And my political steer on that, sir, would be that we have to be very careful with that. And just like nursery funding, let's make sure that provision is in place before we set up funds, give people false promises, which then they can't act upon. So I don't think that's good for any government to do that, but we need to be realistic and take on the difficult challenges and put the training in place first, sir.
Thank you, Minister. We now move to question 17, which Deputy Catherine Curtis will put to the Minister for Justice and Home Affairs. Deputy Curtis.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister advise what oversight she has of court processes, in particular the timescales for bringing prosecutions to court for trial or sentencing, and how, if at all, the victims and their families are kept informed of the status of their case by the Minister's department?
Thank you, sir, and I thank the Deputy for the question. Sir, the courts are independent of government in accordance with well-established principles of justice independence. Members will be aware that the Law Officers Department acts as the prosecution service in Jersey and equally are independent of government. That said, it is recognised that interests of justice are best served by all parties within the criminal justice system working together in partnership. Members of my department sit on the Criminal Justice Working Group, along with other entities that make up our criminal justice system. Support and services to victims can be provided by a number of agencies, depending on the nature of the case. Some of these fall within my area of responsibility, whilst others are provided by valued third sector partners. Victims are kept informed of the status of their case by the officer in charge of that case and their independent sexual violence advisor if they have consented to having one. Jersey Domestic Abuse Service support victims of domestic abuse and or sexual violence through the Independent Domestic Violence and Sexual Violence Advisory Service. These advisors are the main point of contact for victims while their case progresses through the criminal justice system. They provide them with regular updates and also support them through the court process. Victims First provide support to all witnesses and victims of crime, with the exception of victims of domestic or sexual abuse, whom JDAS support. Victims First will complete a needs assessment to provide tailored support through the entire criminal justice process.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. Does the Minister believe there is sufficient accountability and governance of court processes?
I do believe that there is sufficient governance in relation to the court process. However, as a result of the Violence Against Women and Girls Task Force, I have agreed to continue with the recommendation which talks about an independent review of the criminal justice system which should be conducted in relation to domestic violence, rape and serious sexual offences to determine whether current arrangements deliver the best outcomes for victims, defendants and justice. The report did not define in precise terms what the review should look like. In my response to the Task Force's report, I committed to undertake detailed discussions with the relevant stakeholders to establish the best and most appropriate method of fulfilling this recommendation for Jersey. I want to make sure any review is focused on improving outcomes for victims and does not unduly distract those working in the area from their important day-to-day work. So I'm looking forward to working with the Attorney General and others so that we can ensure that from the start of the process to the end of the process, that our criminal justice system and our delivery for justice, but in particular to victims, is first class.
Thank you, Minister. That concludes that period of questions. We now move to questions without notice, and the first period of questions are questions for the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development, and the first question is from Deputy Breniff.
Thank you, sir. Following the good news that a new version of Bergerac has been commissioned by UK TV, can the Minister update the Assembly on the government's potential grant of around 1.8 million to the production company?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. This is obviously a difficult question to answer directly because it is commercial sensitive negotiations that are ongoing. What I can say is that those negotiations are ongoing, and officers and Visit Jersey are working closely to create a package that might be acceptable to government for funding.
Supplementary?
Yes, sir. If I have a worry about the reboot, I guess it's that it's going to be confined to what might be termed a niche digital channel without the huge reach of BBC One that we were so familiar with in the 1980s. So can I ask the Minister, has his department, as part of that process he's described, prepared a formal cost-benefit analysis or business case for government funding, and how will the final decision actually be taken?
Thank you, sir. I share exactly the same concern as the Deputy. It is not just a case of, there's a production, therefore, and it's about Bergerac, therefore it needs to be funded. It is a case of, is this the right production to be shown in the right places? Will it attract the right audience and the right numbers of audience? And so those are exactly the questions that I am asking. A business case has been prepared and has been circulating through government as it seeks relevant authorisations.
So the final part of my question was how will a decision be taken?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. I believe I will have to make the decision as to whether or not to seek that funding, but that will depend upon things such as, is the funding available? I know funding for any kind of extraneous activity outside of the core government plans are very difficult to find. And so it is not just a matter of, is it the right thing? It's, do we have the funds available as well? So, but I believe the final decision is likely to fall to me, but not necessarily as well, because I think there's a question as to, Visit Jersey's role in that and the possibility that they could make that decision as well. So.
Dublet.
Thank you, sir. Could the Minister give his view on the principle of a 4-day working week and how it might improve productivity and morale in either the private or public sector?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. To my knowledge, no formal work has been undertaken on this question, but it is a question that I think is of interest. There have been studies in various places around the world which have shown benefits to the 4-day working week. But a 4-day working week is also something that can be understood in different ways. In my mind, a 4-day working week, if you say it's 40 hours a week that somebody works, a 4-day working week would be 10 hours a day, still 40 hours, as opposed to reducing the number of hours in the overall week. Some people see it differently. My understanding is that there are studies that show that productivity is increased with a 4-day working week, and I think a great deal of that is down to the longer weekend that comes from that, which enables greater community, family, and social engagement. So there are benefits to be had at the wider community level as well. So.
Supplementary?
Is the Minister minded to explore this further, and if he is, what would the first step be for the public sector, I think, initially?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Interestingly, if it is to be explored further in the public sector, it probably wouldn't fall to my department to do that. It would probably fall to, I'd imagine, the Chief Minister's department, as that's where human resources matters are decided, and the State's Employment Board, indeed. As far as the private sector element is concerned, I think it's very difficult for a government to tell businesses how to structure their working weeks, but I would be surprised to find that no businesses in Jersey had tried it, and indeed since COVID, with the greater flexibility in working that many businesses offer, it may well be the case that some businesses are already trialling the 4-day working week. It is something that I'm happy to look into, but it is not a part of the core programme that the Department for the Economy is currently pursuing. It's something that we'd more informally look into, sir.
Deputy Ayer.
Thank you, sir. What actions is the Minister taking to modernise the licensing law? We've all been waiting far too long for new legislation. Thank you, sir.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. When the Deputy talks about the licensing law, I assume he, or I take that to mean the liquor licensing law. We say there's also an events licensing law. And, but I am committed to looking at both, because both of them are somewhat old, and both of them are quite onerous in the demands that they place upon businesses or organisations. It's not just businesses. I often make that distinction, particularly where events licensing is concerned. So officers this year are undertaking scoping of that law. They are beginning to do work on the matters with regard to both licensing laws, with a view to bringing amendments which would seek to simplify those laws. And I would hope that certainly by 2026, by the end of this assembly, that we would have both of those changes kind of brought in, or at least lodged. It is difficult, it is incredibly complex, particularly the liquor licensing law. But that is work that has already begun, and it's work that my officers know is a priority for me as a minister.
Supplementary. Deputy Alex Curtis.
Thank you, sir. Following the Minister's sign-off of £2 million for an Impact Jersey Challenge programme focusing on care tech, will the Minister explain what involvement he had in the choice of care as a topic, and did he provide any specific directions as to how the challenge should operate?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Care was suggested to me as a topic because it is an area we know in Jersey, and indeed the Future Economy programme speaks directly to this, that over the coming years, healthcare and social care will be in greater and greater demand in the island. They will place greater and greater costs on government and individuals. As a result, it was suggested to me that care might be an interesting subject for the Impact Fund to address, and I wholeheartedly agreed with that because of the demands that care is going to place on the island. I can't remember the second part of the question, but if you don't mind.
So it was about any specific directions the Minister gave to the function and operation of the Challenge programme.
So I don't recall making any specific directions other than agreeing that it was very interesting and hopefully productive challenge. So.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. In the operation, does the Minister commit to the strategic programme plan that was signed off to the delivery of Impact Jersey, which focuses and highlights openness to both tendering, to opportunities and to the outputs of programmes as a key requirement of any challenge and the operation of the fund?
Minister.
So that strategic framework still holds, and so from that perspective, sir, the commitment remains. Obviously, Impact Jersey is being entirely operated through Digital Jersey and with its own specific kind of board, and it is to them that they operate within that strategic framework, sir.
Any further questions for this Minister? Dr. Brenner.
So I welcome the Minister's commitment in answering written question 101 to publishing an annual report detailing the way the 1% on arts, culture and heritage is spent. Can he describe the process by which a decision to make an award to a body is taken?
Minister.
Yes, sir. Well, it is interesting because there are different avenues to grant funding. Some of them can be through. So let me start again. As Minister and as a department, we fund a number of arm's length organisations directly. Those include Jersey Heritage, Jersey Arts Centre, Art House Jersey, and others. So, such as Digital Jersey, Visit Jersey, and so on. So when it comes to, but not from the 1%, when it comes to those organisations, they in themselves provide some grants directly to the artistic community, particularly Art House Jersey. And so they have their own methods and own channels for application. I was really keen when I was Assistant Minister and the 1% came into play. I was really keen that there are also a government channel, which means that you don't have to go through Art House Jersey or through the Opera House or Art Centre or any other arm's length organisation. And partly this was because I'm very aware that when you put organisations in charge of grant giving, they become gatekeepers. And so I wanted a diversity of gatekeepers, for want of a better phrase. So I did ask officers to set up a framework within government which enables them as officers to receive grant applications and then to award grant applications as sees fit. That process is in train, and so it is possible through the Creative Island Partnership to, for any artistic organisation or individual to apply for grants, and officers then themselves, I have no role in this, officers then themselves award the grants.
Supplementary?
Yes, might it help if he was to publish, as part of the report he mentioned in his answer to the written question, a transparent process by which applications are judged and the criteria for success, so that applicants know what needs to be done to achieve a successful award and don't waste time providing information that isn't required or on applications which are unlikely to be successful?
Thank you, sir. Transparency is absolutely key. There is nothing to hide in this area, sir. So I believe that information was available on the Creative Island Partnerships site on gov.je. If it's not the case, I will ask for that to be changed. But I believe that process was publicly available, sir.
Deputy Kovacs.
Thank you, sir. I am aware that a few years back was established a agricultural research center in Jersey, and there was also a collaboration between Digital Jersey, Rothamsted Research in Harpenden, Hertfordshire, which is the oldest agricultural research institution in the world. And I see that now that the center is actually facing a funding crisis, and I know we were linking into that research, with the view of increasing the level of food security, sustainability, innovation and productivity in the rural area. Would the Minister see benefit in reintroducing an agricultural research center in Jersey?
Minister.
Sir, I believe strongly that it would be hugely advantageous for the island to reinstate the agricultural research centre that used to be at Howard Davis Farm. It wouldn't in itself have to be at Howard Davis Farm, but I think it would be hugely beneficial to the island for the reasons that the Deputy just outlined. And I believe it's been a loss to the island that we no longer have an agricultural research centre. That said, there are no specific plans at the moment to reinstate it, and partly that's because particularly with the increase in the minimum wage that will be coming through, so a large part of the grant provided through the increased amount of money available to the agriculture sector already being used, just making sure that the businesses in the sector are able to continue to thrive.
Supplementary?
Yes, please. What steps could the Minister consider taking in achieving such a center and involving younger generation in it too, to grow interest for this sector?
Minister.
So, as I said, there is no specific programme around developing that agricultural research centre. It's my personal opinion that it would be beneficial to the island, and so at the moment there are no specific steps to be taken.
There's Renouf.
I'll take opportunity. There's been a lot of publicity about a possible tunnel to France. Can the Minister say if there is any work currently ongoing in government to further this plan?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. There is no direct programme of work. There is, I believe, in SPPP, a small amount of work just around the general feasibility and reaching out to other jurisdictions such as Guernsey and France. I have been in correspondence with, and also just communication with my counterpart in Guernsey, and we have talked about the possibility of setting up a joint commission. I use that word in its looser sense, a joint body. I get that may look at this, but over the next couple of years, I think it is very much a case of, or in fact, I believe the right thing to do is to start the conversation. The whole kind of motivation behind the publicity around the possibility of a tunnel a couple of months ago was the fact that from an engineering perspective, a tunnel is possible. From a financial perspective, using the private sector, a tunnel is possible. Places like the Faroe Islands show us that these are not unusual things and they are possible. If we want to solve a housing crisis, make sure we have enough workers, encourage tourism, increase food resilience and make sure that we have deliveries every day that aren't weather affected, then a tunnel is something that could answer those questions. But, sir, there would be an impact on island identity. And so, sir, the work that would, if any work is to take place over the coming few years, it would be about starting that conversation, because I think that's the most important thing. I think it would be negligent of me as Minister to ignore the fact that it's financially, engineering-wise, it is all possible. And just to ignore that, I think would be wrong. I think it is right for a Minister in this position to put it to the island that this is something that is feasible. What do islanders think? What do islanders want? Do they want us to pursue it further? So whilst I believe some work is ongoing, it is very light work. It is not heavy-duty, costly work. It is about just setting up that conversation, sir.
That brings that period of questions to an end. The second period of questions is for the Minister for Treasury and Resources. Deputy Doublé.
Thank you, sir. Given that government often signposts to the Citizens Advice Bureau and indeed often for help with their tax returns, is the Treasury Minister aware of the massive increases in numbers of islanders seeking help from this organisation? Indeed, by February of this year, nearly half of the total numbers of referrals from the previous year were being seen by the end of February this year. And will the Minister look at increased investment from government to support this organisation?
Minister.
Yes, I am aware of the financial pressures being faced by Citizens Advice. They have written to me, but any request for further growth funding has to go through appropriate channels, and I will be advising Citizens Advice of that shortly.
Supplementary.
Is the Minister supportive of a growth bid in the government plan to support this organisation?
Minister.
Without further information, I can't say that, but we have to be aware that there are very many good growth bids, and there will be a constant balancing exercise as to how we meet them all.
Deputy Renouf.
Thank you, sir. The 2024 government plan committed the Treasury to investigate the introduction of an appropriate carbon tax or charge relating to the operation of private aircraft. Has this work started yet? If it has, can she update the Assembly on progress? And if it hasn't, can she explain when it will?
Minister.
Yes, the work has started. It's at a preliminary stage. I believe the Minister for the Environment and I had a meeting with the tax team and the environment team just over a week ago, I think, to discuss possible options for carbon taxes. But there is still more work to be done.
Supplementary.
Can the Minister say whether the proposal will be brought in the next government plan that will be lodged in lodged later this year, June, I believe?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. I don't think I can say that just at the moment, because any new tax would have to be carefully considered and consulted on with all relevant stakeholders. We would also have to be sure of all the information available. We would also have to be sure of how the money would be applied, any proceeds of that tax would be applied. I would like to say yes for the next government plan, but I'm not quite sure that's feasible, and it may be the one after. Thank you.
Deputy Ayer.
Thank you, sir. It was proposed that the income forecasting group should produce an absolute minimum of 2 forecasts each year, with one being no later than March of each year. When can we expect to see the latest edition published? Thank you.
Minister.
I'm sorry, I wasn't aware that that report was late. I will ask my officers to chase it. Thank you.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. In the last Income Forecasting Group report 2023, it was estimated that stamp duty and LTT for 2024 would be £39 million. Does the Minister think that this is achievable? Thank you.
Minister.
I can't comment on that at the moment, sir. I don't know in my head what the forecast stamp duty receivables for 2024 are. They deserve on a huge number of things, including changes in the housing market and all the other areas in which we charge stamp duty. So I can't confirm that at the moment, but I will ask my officers if they're able to provide an answer to that question.
Deputy Alex Curtis.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister update the Assembly on any conversations she has had with SOJDC as shareholder representative on their plans for the waterfront site, as well as the approved 4th IFC building? And within those, has she provided any specific policy direction?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. In terms of the waterfront, I understand that the SOGDC are currently discussing options for route to liberation with INE, as this was one of the principal reasons for refusal. SOGDC need to await the conclusion of these discussions, along with options around reclamation and the Lacolette recycling of waste before considering any redesign of the layout, scale, massing or architecture. However, I do believe that this work is ongoing now as a matter of some priority for them, given the scale of that proposed development.
Supplementary. Deputy Andrews.
Thank you, sir. The Fiscal Policy Panel recommended that a long-term funding plan should be implemented for the strategic reserve. So could the Minister please confirm whether this will be a priority of hers, and if so, will there be a long-term funding plan that will be implemented before the end of this term of office?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. I thank the Deputy. Yes, I agree that is a priority. The Fiscal Policy Panel have been clear that we need to increase the amount in the strategic reserve, and that is something which I certainly believe we should be doing. However, there are, of course, competing bids for money, the constantly competing bids for money, and we need to have close consideration as to where funds are applied to build the strategic reserve and how we can develop that and increase it, along with meeting all the other demands for funding that come from multiple sources. But it is certainly something we will be considering with a view to a long-term plan being developed very soon.
Supplementary.
Yes, thank you, sir. With the strategic reserve forecast at 17% of gross value added, when it should be somewhere between 30 to 60% of gross value added, is the Minister open to the introduction of new taxes? And if so, will those taxes be capital taxes? Thank you, sir.
Minister.
We are not presently considering new taxes. It may be that when the one new tax is Pillar 2, which will be starting from 2025, I believe. We are still working on that, and it may be that Pillar 2 income will form some of the basis of input into the strategic reserve.
Deputy Wall.
Thank you, sir. Is the Minister concerned that there will be significant payouts required as a result of the mistreatment alleged in the rheumatology report?
Minister.
That's not something I've been closely involved in. That is something which I would also expect would be for discussion with our insurers. Clearly, anything that raises our insurance premiums is of concern and is of concern for patient safety, but I don't think I can say any more about that at present. Thank you.
Supplementary. Deputy Miles.
Thank you, sir. Could the Minister please give her views on the removal of GST from period products?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. I think my views on the removal of GST from period products are quite well known. I don't think it will serve any purpose. I think it will serve a point of principle, but in terms of alleviating period poverty, it will do absolutely nothing. As I've said more than once, it's a matter of simple maths. Simply removing GST from period products, if on the assumption that a woman spends £5 a month, will save a woman on low income 25 pence or £3 a year. I think that's quite insulting to suggest that that's an alleviation to poverty on any scope. However, the free period scheme, the free period product scheme would save that woman £5 a month or £60 a year, and that is a much, much better outcome. I think we also have to consider the evidence that's available for any policy objectives, and the evidence from England is very clearly that in 80% of cases, the saving was not passed on, it was kept by retailers, and that generally no more than 1% was passed on. So I think GST really serves no purpose in helping women who are struggling to buy period products. We also have to consider the impact on businesses, and we would have to consider all businesses, not just those who say it's easy for them. I know there are retailers who say that it would be difficult for them to adjust to, but you'll remember that we all received an email last year from a small pharmacist who said that the impact of removing GST could cause such an administrative burden that they may stop providing period products. I think any policy that results in a limitation of supply would not be helpful to anyone. Thank you.
Supplementary? Deputy Stevenson.
Thank you, sir. Given that my question's just been asked, I'll change it slightly. Was the Minister aware that her ministerial colleague, the Social Security Minister, was going to make public comments around 6 days ago to say that she was going to ask the government to reconsider removing GST from period products? Were you aware before it was published?
Minister.
I believe the Minister was expressing her opinion as she's entitled to do.
Supplementary. Deputy Iyer.
Thank you, sir. I was very pleased to hear the Minister state that she has no intention of bringing any new taxes, but has she considered a vaping tax? Thank you, sir.
Minister.
Yes, a vaping tax is under consideration, but we just need to look at all the, it would be a very new thing to do. It would also be it would be novel for Jersey it would be unusual for Jersey to increase a tax. It doesn't exist in other places, but the fact that the UK have introduced one gives us some guidance, and it is something that we are actively considering.
Supplementary. Deputy Renouf.
Thank you. I think it was last week or the week before the Chief Minister said that he had an ambition to extend the pay rise that was granted to teachers to frontline staff. Has the Treasury Minister put any figures on how much this would cost and worked out where the money would come from?
Minister.
Pay rises to staff are a matter for the SEB, and they are funded through the Central Reserve normally. The Central Reserve contains money every year contains money for pay rises, and for contingencies and unexpected amounts. So if the SEB agrees with that increase, it would be funded from Central Reserve.
Supplementary.
Yes, is the Minister saying that there is enough money in the Central Reserves under existing allocations to pay for that ambition, and it will not require any further allocation of funds from anywhere else within the budget?
Minister.
I think there's always a balancing act has to be done with any allocation of funds, but I believe the increase would be about £7 million, and I believe that money is available if that was the decision.
Deputy Wilson.
Thank you, sir. Could the Minister explain whether or not she is still supportive of the work that was initially started on the Sustainable Health Funding model?
Minister.
Yes, absolutely. It seems to me that that is something that needs to be done. We need to understand what our healthcare needs are for the future, and we need to understand how to pay for them. So yes, I agree that is work that should continue.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. Could the Minister give an indication of perhaps when that work will be presented to the Assembly for consideration?
Minister.
I think that is possibly a matter for the Health Minister who will be running that project, so I can't confirm timescales at present.
Any more questions for this Minister? We move on to the final period of questions for the Chief Minister. Deputy Duplet.
Thank you, sir. Given the Council of Ministers' commitment to implementing all of the recommendations within the VORG Task Force report, will the Chief Minister ensure that appropriate funding is directed to partner organisations who will deliver on many of the actions within the report?
Chief Minister.
Thank you, sir. As we work through the report and start to implement the recommendations, we will ensure that funding is available certainly internally within the government to deal with the recommendations. If the a deputy is referring to third sector organisations as well, we will work with them. I can't give a cast iron guarantee on funding, but we will do our very best. That, I think, could be a matter for further states debate, or certainly inclusion in a future government plan, sir. Thank you.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. Is the Chief Minister aware of the funding shortfall being faced by Frida, formerly known as the Women's Refuge, and indeed the previous government commitment to fund at least 50% for this organisation is falling short? Would the Chief Minister agree to look at this urgently to make sure that at least 50% of the costs of this organisation are met by government?
Thank you, sir. But of course we will look at the funding. I have visited many third sector organisations and charitable organisations since our time in office, and I think the challenge is shared by many organisations. The government is doing its very best to help them to address that where possible, and I can announce that £1 million is shortly to be released from dormant bank account into Jersey Community Fund, with I hope a further £1 million to be confirmed by the External Relations Minister later in the year, sir. So that's going to be of some help. But I am aware, the government is aware, sir, and we are doing what we can to help within the restraints of our budget.
Deputy Stevenson.
Thank you, sir. We've heard today that the government doesn't want to progress with the Public Services Ombudsman, and then we've heard that the Health Minister doesn't plan on recruiting a new chair for the Health Advisory Board. Sir, does the Chief Minister's government have a problem with being held to account?
Absolutely not, sir. Being held to account is part of the job, not just for the government, but for all of us here in this Assembly. We haven't said we are against a Public Services Ombudsman. We've said we want to look at other options to make sure we find a solution that's delivering the best value for money. In relation to the comments of the Health Minister in relation to the chair of the Interim Health Board, interim chair of the Interim Health Board, if I remember right, so he didn't say we were going to be without a chair. He's saying he's appointed an existing member as chair to see out the remaining term of office, which is only 9 months.
Supplementary?
Yes, thank you, sir. The publication of minutes of meetings are an important part of open and transparent government and a useful tool for those who are working to hold government to account. I'm pleased to see that we've now got some COM minutes that have been published. Will the Chief Minister commit to publishing States Employment Board minutes as well? I believe the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel, in its previous and current form, have been asking to have them shared with it for many, many months, and they're still still haven't been forthcoming. Can the Chief Minister address that, please?
Yes, sir. States Employment Board are not planning to share minutes simply because they contain a lot of personal data relating to individuals' employment. So we cannot agree to a carte blanche publication of States Employment Board minutes. If, however, there are particular questions that members wish to ask, we will deal with those individually, sir. But I would stress that we often deal with many matters of a personal nature with States employees. Thank you.
Deputy Wilson.
Thank you, sir. Does the Chief Minister accept that an evidence base is critical to policy development and the formation of new laws by this Assembly?
I'm sorry, so I didn't hear the first part of the question.
Okay. Thank you. I'll repeat. Does the Chief Minister accept that an evidence base is critical to policy development and the formulation of new laws?
Chief Minister.
Yes. Generally, sir, yes, that has to underpin evidence-based policy is always helpful. But there has to be, I think, other inputs, such as future policy, strategic planning, aims and goals of where this island needs to be also needs to be part of the formulation. But it does need to be, I think, based on the foundation of evidence, but there are other inputs as well, I think, that makes for good policy, good legislation.
Supplementary?
Yes. Does the Chief Minister recognise the importance of the reviews and evidence prepared by the previous government? And would he not agree that it is in fact this work that has allowed him the luxury of time to implement a lot of work that has already been evidenced and started by the previous government, and respectfully acknowledge this?
I will happily, respectfully acknowledge that. This new government has never claimed or tried to take credit for any of the work. We've been very open. Some of the work we've picked up goes back prior to the last government, to the government before that, and the government before that. Some very good work goes back to the previous government. I can, off the top of my head, sir, look at the successful pilot scheme on school lunches, the work on violence against women and girls task force report. We picked up the baton on that one and run with that. So we do accept that and acknowledge that. And some works are new ideas and aspirations of this current government, which we built in to the corporate strategic policy to, I think, provide a balanced blend of work for this Assembly. But I would say, sir, it's not all about credit. We shouldn't be here to accept credit. We should be here to get the job done, sir, and work collectively.
Deputy Alex Curtis.
Thank you, sir. In the recently published FPP Housing Market Review, the report concludes that whilst the panel assumes housing prices will remain stable in 24, quote, however, there is a risk that prices may fall in the short term. Does the Chief Minister not agree that falling house prices is not a risk, but in fact essential to addressing the housing affordability crisis?
Chief Minister.
I do acknowledge that we need more affordable homes, especially for younger islanders and young families. So falling house prices is important. But we don't want falling house prices out of control. We want some form of stabilisation in that. Because a lot of islanders are invested and borrowed in their and have borrowed against the value of their properties. So whilst I support that in principle, we don't want to see a large amount of negative equities bringing in hardship for some islanders, whereby partly solving one problem, but creating a bigger problem. So it's all about a balance.
Supplementary?
Yes, thank you. And I appreciate the risks of a sudden fall creating negative equity. But if lower house prices and significantly lower house prices in the long run is not an objective of the Minister, is he not concerned that a plan of building, as outlined in the CSP, would deliver an infinite trap that islanders would be buying into a market at too high a point, and we wouldn't be able to see a stable yet continued decrease in the cost of housing as a ratio to a person's earning?
So I think it is a priority. Reducing the cost of housing. It's, and one of our key priorities is providing more affordable housing. So I'm not sure if there was another part to the question, but the original question is yes, reducing the cost of homes, providing more affordable housing is a key priority.
Deputy Renouf.
Thank you, sir. In his resignation letter last year, the Constable of St John expressed serious concern at, quote, the lack of any coherent health strategy to provide strategic direction in this vital area, unquote. As Chief Minister, does he believe there should be a health strategy under this government?
Chief Minister.
I think health is probably for the government, council and ministers, the biggest single challenge we face, and that is being and not being helped by the failure of previous governments to provide better facilities. Well, we're now on top of that. I have full confidence in the health minister and the team. They're in there, they're turning over stones and looking into all of the difficult problems, and I await for their judgment on how best we move things forward. I align with the comments of the former Assistant Minister. and would support an appropriate strategy should it be forthcoming. I don't want to commit to further strategies without having a proper debate on them, and I'll await the findings of the Health Minister, but I think it's likely we'll head in that direction.
Supplementary?
So it's not quite the commitment that I was hoping for. We hopes that we will head in the direction of a health strategy.
Oh, it is, yes, sorry. Didn't see it. Sorry.
Sorry. He says he will head in the direction of a health strategy dependent on conversations with the Minister. Does he accept that decisions around, for example, the siting of healthcare facilities, whether or not to build a mental health facility at St Saviour, and so on, will be driven by or have to be driven by a healthcare strategy, and without one, we're rudderless?
So I did not say I would not support a new health strategy. I was giving courtesy to the ministerial team that were working on it. I support a health strategy, and if they come forward with that recommendation, they will get my full support. I hope that clarifies the matter.
Deputy Kaybash.
Thank you, sir. My question is to seek clarification on one of my written questions to the Chief Minister, which I don't believe was a clear response. My written question 120 per 2024 with the table answer on 9th of April said, the Chief Minister said the Environment Minister and I are aware of the timetable set by the states for the development levy legislation and will be meeting to discuss the next steps in respect of this piece of work. Considering that my question was a follow-up to the written question from Deputy Jean to the Environment Minister, which who responded that a bid to secure the funding for the work that is required to be undertaken, which was programmed for 2024 in order to meet the timeline established, was made as part of the government plan 2024-2027, but was unsuccessful. And in such circumstances, this work will remain pending until such time that the resources are made available to enable it to be undertaken. So considering that any cost with such consultation, if necessary, would be easily recovered from the first transaction once this levy is implemented, can the Chief Minister state if the timeline will be met, and if not, why not?
Thank you, sir. And looking at the written answer to the question, it was very short, so perhaps I can just elucidate a little more. And I've discussed this with the Environment Minister. The original proposition which was approved by the Assembly we thought was slightly ambiguous insofar as you could read it into asking for a levy or a tax on any kind of development of any size to any property. Now, I don't think it's right that we for example, somebody puts a small conservatory or a garden fence or a balcony onto their property, and as it increases the value, that should be taxed. But under the current wording of the proposition, that could be the case. And so as we understood it, something that we support is initially a levy on rezoning. I think that's where it all started. If a piece of land with worth an amount was rezoned for housing and suddenly increased exponentially, then that's where I think that will be the starting point for the levy. So we are looking at the detail of that, sir. But I think in answer to the question, we will undertake to make sure the resources are available to introduce it, and we try and work to the original timescale. We might, however, have to come back with a revised wording to the Assembly.
Supplementary?
Okay. Given that the Assembly agreed that wording was giving enough flexibility for the Minister, for the Council of Ministers to implement in the way it sees fit, and the response given was that the funding for consultation wasn't available, as I stated, in the first transaction, once this levy, in whatever format would be introduced, would cover that cost, what exactly reason would be for any delay in that aspect, especially that the proposition expanded the year on the term?
I'm not sure we said we were going to delay. We're working to the timetable of the 31st of March 2025, and we still hope to be able to commit to that. Sorry if I didn't make that clear.
Deputy Moore.
Thank you, sir. Referring to an answer the Chief Minister gave to a question from Deputy Renouf, the Chief Minister described some of the work being undertaken by the Health Minister as turning over stones. I wonder if the Chief Minister could confirm to the Assembly that that also includes asking backbenchers to interview officials on behalf of the Minister. Sorry, sir, and whether he considers that to be appropriate.
I don't seek to align the turning over of stones. I'm sure members will know what I mean by that phrase. I do not relate that to any conversations or requests that two States Minister might have had with another member of the Assembly, sir. Whether it's appropriate, I'm not sure of the work that's been requested. I'm not sure if it's being carried out. I'm not sure how it is being carried out. And I think each member of this Assembly has a right to ask questions of any of State's departments. And I think it's a matter for the individual, sir. Of course, we have a work going on in the scrutiny function as well. And as long as everything is can work collaboratively without conflict, then I don't see a problem. But as I said, so to reiterate, I'm not, I don't know the detail of what the former chief, what Deputy Moore is actually referring to.
That brings that period of questions to an end. Before we start public business, a decision needs to be taken about whether to amend the order in which the propositions will be taken. I understand the Minister for the Environment has a proposition to make. Minister.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I'd like to propose a suspension of Standing Order 34 under Standing Order 80, which will allow the debate on P82 to be moved down the order paper to take place tomorrow. I propose this in order that Deputy Jeune, who's chair of the Environment Scrutiny Panel, and Constable of St Mary, who is also a member of that panel, can attend the debate, which they would otherwise miss, because they are away on state's business at the British Irish Parliamentary Assembly.
I understand, Minister, that unless the proposal is adopted, the 6-month period will have elapsed and the proposition will be withdrawn. Is that right?
Indeed, sir, as States members will be aware, Standing Order 34.2 says that a proposition which is not debated within 6 months of the day which is lodged shall be taken as being withdrawn. And unfortunately for myself, 6 months falls today, and tomorrow is 6 months plus 1 day, hence my proposal to suspend Standing Order 34. I have informed also by email States members previous to today that I intended to do this, sir.
You have, Minister. Is the proposition seconded?
Sir.
Does any member wish to speak on the proposition? Those in favour of adopting the proposition?
Sorry.
Forgive me, Deputy Secretary. Yes, you wish to speak on the proposition.
So I don't have a problem with this, but I think it's important to put on record that one would expect in future for the same courtesy to be extended to other members. So if one is away on state's business and one can't make a debate for whatever reason, I just note it's not the Minister who is doing it for his own convenience. It's being done for two other members of the Assembly who you could consider key players and who need to speak on this. Others would say that in their absence there is still a panel that can speak on their behalf. So I think it's important that in future, if other members are away and they might be back later on in the week for a sitting which is ongoing, that they're also given the same courtesy because if it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander, and I'm sure members will be even-handed when they apply that suspension of standing orders in the future, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy Iyer.
Yes, sir. May I just ask the Minister in his summing up, if it so happened that business was concluded early today and that the PA2, the offshore wind, came up for debate today, would he also therefore withdraw it? Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? I call upon the Minister to reply. Minister.
Thank you, sir. Something I'd just like to say to the Assembly, that the proposal to delay 24 hours was put to me by the Chairman of the Scrutiny Panel, It wasn't at my suggestion, although I was happy to facilitate it. The Deputy is quite right, of course. If we conclude public business, everything apart from P82 early this afternoon, as States members might expect, I'm ready to go. We'll start the debate. We can't possibly hold up and delay. We will, if it's the only item left on the order paper, I'm very happy. I could start now if we like, but I'd prefer to do as I propose. Thank you, sir.
Those in favour of adopting the proposition kindly show. Thank you very much. The proposition is adopted. Is the adjournment proposed? Yes, sir. Members content to adjourn. The Assembly stands adjourned until 2:15.